there. All right, here we go. Back at it here on the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast. So grateful that you would join us here once again. Bringing you coaches from around the country, around the world. A lot of times, we're gonna stay here in the U.S. for this week. I'm super excited to talk with this week's guest. I'm your host, Mike Cunningham, National Business Development Manager for Gill Athletics, and today's guest, she's actually been on my list for a while, and then I got to meet her in person, and I knew that I had the right person on the right list, and so we're able to finally get this coordinated here after track season. So help me welcome from Niceville, Florida, Niceville High School, the assistant head coach, and probably what we're going to talk about more than anything today, throws coach there in Niceville, Florida. Help me welcome the wise and wonderful Miss Emily Webb. Emily, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
As we were talking a little bit before we hit record, I'm still a little tired actually. When we're recording this, I'm just coming off of 2 trips to Oregon and love it. Have you been out to Eugene at all yet?
I have not. That is on my bucket list.
You've got to. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of all the stuff about how hard it is to get out there and the expense, and all of that is true, by the way. I'm a huge Eugene, Oregon, Hayward Field fan. Even I still say, yeah, all that is true. It absolutely is true, but it's worth it. It is.
I want to do that so bad. That's on my list, hopefully for next year with my crew. So
yeah. What's held you back? I mean, Nike high schools and things like that. What's held you back?
Honestly, from when our season ends, because we're earlier, we're one of the earlier track seasons too. And I just feel like it's so hard to either keep them training at a high level, because I really try to get my kids to peak towards the regionals and state time. Yeah. And so then it kind of gets a little frustrating, gets really hot here. And then trying to keep them motivated for another, 4 to 6 weeks to get out there and still compete at a high level. I think a lot of kids, they get frustrated. So, or a lot of them are graduated and now they're focused on going to college.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially, as I get the vibe from you on social, and we'll learn more here today. You don't want to take those kids out there just to participate. No. You want to, okay, if we're going to go out, and by the way, we're going out and we're going to compete against some of the best in the country. We're going to be at the top that we can. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. This is the part of the podcast. It's all unscripted, guys. For all you guys that think like I have this like curated thing and these questions, I literally hit record and have no idea what we're going to talk about, or even the order that we're going to talk about. But because you brought that up, so we recently, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to this, back in April and May, I went on a mission and interviewed one coach from every state to talk about their outdoor state meet and things like that. And I'm real close, probably by the time you guys are actually listening to this, having a LinkedIn article and a Twitter article, kind of my view of summation of all 51. And that's impossible, by the way. I can't even get all 51 in one article, or it'd be a book. But one of the aspects that I started thinking about as I was interviewing coaches goes a little bit to what you're saying there in regards to the time frame between your state meet and say like a Nike high school nationals and things like that. I wonder how much these national championships. So you got Nike, you have New Balance, and Adidas all having a national championship on one weekend, which I'm all cool with. I know there's a lot of arguments about, everybody gets to call themselves All-American. Yeah. I'm cool with a kid having a championship experience though. So whether they can afford to get to North Carolina, Pennsylvania, or Eugene, awesome. So I was watching the meet when I was there this past week, and I was like, 90% of these kids, this is it. This is their last meet. They're not going to college. Boy, what a way to go out. Like, good for them. Why are people complaining about this? Let them have that. Anyway, the question I kind of had, because one of my questions for each state meet, was, do you have a meet of champions? Because in Florida, what do we have? 5 classes, 6 classes? 4. I almost said 4 too. And I was like, no, it's more. 4 classes. So I always like to know, does the, the number one, the 4A javelin champ, 3A, 2A, 1A, do we get them all together and have one more meet? And a lot of people, because their statement's a little bit later than yours, was talking about, well, it's hard because, sometimes they're going to, to Nike nationals or whatever, or we can't forget there's still AAU and USATF JOs going on. Or to your point, what you brought up a second ago was graduation, summer jobs, football preparations for the fall, whether it's high school or college, college visits, admission, what do you do before you go actually college? You go like orientation. Visitate, things like that. And I just wonder, it's like, man, I wonder like what effect these meets are having for that side of things and how they're affected by those. So it just was interesting when you talk about your meet being so early, and 4 to 6 weeks after, that's tough for an 18,
Yeah.
we're talking about sub 18-year-old kids here too.
Yeah. And to try to keep them training at that high level, because, you're asking, well, for us, it's like, the end of January, beginning of February is when our season begins. And then it ends middle of May. And so, trying to keep them just training at a high level and then asking them 4 more weeks or 6 more weeks. It just, yeah, I've seen them get a little bit burnout. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's just kind of like, let's end on a good note
Yeah.
instead of trying to push it and then they get frustrated.
Yeah. I don't think we talk about the emotional status, maybe the emotional state of athletes. So you, as their high school coach, I'm assuming, everything is pointing towards state. Like, how do we prepare for state? How do we qualify for state? Then how do we do well? So when they do get to state, boy, you've been, crescendoing everything, training, talk, motivation, the whole thing for this state meet. They go and hopefully they do really well. And, I know from social media, your kids do really well. Well, that's the top of their mountain. And then you say, hey, so 4 weeks from now,
Yeah.
there's another amazing meet.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm always interested in for that meet, and then for like our collegiates that go pro, they're no longer wearing their singlet for their high school, and there's no team score. So now it's much more, even though, you'd probably bring a squad of 10 to 20 kids, which is, that's a squad. But there's still no, I know I'm with my teammates, but really it's how well do I do in the javelin? How well do I do in the discus? And I think just like we see in the running events, we see kids split way faster in a relay than they do in the open. And I think that's because they know they have teammates really counting on them. Throwers very hard, right? But I think it's tough I'm only doing it for myself now. I think motivationally, the emotional state of kids, I think that's super tough.
It is. No, it is, because the whole year, the whole season, we're based off of, yes, throwing's individual, but we're doing this for our team. And I think that's one of the coolest atmospheres, and one of the coolest things that we have at Niceville is all those kids are bought in on that level. And so, yeah, when they want to go to a Nike or a New Balance, they're just like, oh, okay, it's whatever. The whole mentality changes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why, when they talk about when kids graduate college and go pro, go to the post collegiate, and they say, oh, they never do as well, or they don't do as well. And I'm like, well, man, once you go post collegiate, you are literally on your own. Even if you're in a training group, there is no team scores. Yeah. There is no uniform. We're not all wearing the same team uniform. You are on your own.
You have to motivate yourself.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like a lot of my kids, I've noticed it, their leadership has made them better athletes, them teaching or them helping and coaching, them showing them, hey, this is a team sport, not just about yourself and individual. It all comes together. And so, yeah, when you're left on your own, sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
I agree. I haven't seen anybody study that. I think of a guy do you know Steve Magnus? Do you know that by name or social media? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was a coach for a long time. He was a really good runner, and then coached at Houston, and even I think for the Oregon Track Club or Bowerman Track Club or something. And now he's he's written a book which I need to read. Supposedly it's awesome, but his social media, his tweet. I live on Twitter, so that's where I read everything. Is much more about philosophy of athletics and specifically track and field, but obviously pulls into other things. He seems like the kind of guy, I got to actually message him and be and ask him if he either has done studies or knows of studies of the emotional state of team versus individual, and not just team sports versus individual sports, but the person that goes through a team sport and then goes to strictly individual because of the way track is set up in this country, in the world, really. So okay, that's enough philosophy for now, Emily. Let's learn more about you. Everyone's tired. They came here to listen to you, not me, and I've been yapping the whole time. So you're in Niceville, which I love because I used to live, I was born in Florida, but lived a lot in the Panhandle. I lived in Fort Walton, Destin, Niceville, Crestview, all those beautiful, beautiful areas. So we're going to learn how you got to Niceville. Let's take a step back, though. Where does track and field, assuming that you were an athlete, maybe you weren't for track and field, where does track and field start for you?
I am from a small town in Ohio, Fremont, Ohio. So where, Toledo, Cleveland, all north. And graduated from a high school with about 68 kids.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and so in middle school, I thought I was a runner, was very much not a runner. Picked up a discus, and in 8th grade, it just kind of, that's literally when it started, and I've never stopped. And I feel like I was obsessed then, and I'm still extremely obsessed now. So,
Do you remember? 'Cause let's stay on that for a second, because it's interesting. We see it now because it's easier. Hindsight's 2020. But when you were an 8th grader, and you're on the team, you think you're a runner, so you're doing some running stuff. But then it's interesting to your face when you had that memory come back of when you first picked up that discus. Do you remember that feeling? Like, was it an automatic like, oh, this is supposed to be in my hand, or was it just like, oh, this is cool, and I don't really enjoy running, so let me try this?
No, I feel like I was supposed to be on like a relay and do high jump, and they didn't have anybody for shot and disc. So they're like, hey, we need someone to just go down there and fill in for our conference meet. And so I went down there and I won. So
With
I
no
like won.
practice.
Yeah, I won the discus, threw from the front of the ring, like, and immediately I was like, one, I like to win. And two, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is pretty cool. So I dropped everything else and I strictly focus on the discus. So that was it. And
Wow.
then, yeah. So when I went to high school, I actually didn't even have a throw specific coach for my freshman and sophomore year, and ended up making it to districts. And I made it to regionals, broke the state or the school record, did all the things. And then I did get a coach, Brenda Wasserman, came in so graciously, and she had the former record. And so she helped me a lot. And our neighboring coach from Fremont Ross like noticed my potential, and so he took me under his wing and literally kind of was one of my biggest mentors. To this day, I was just actually texting him. He was at the New Balance Nationals, and he found my kids with Niceville on because I didn't go to the meet, and he like stopped and found them, and it's just that kind of thrower family,
Yeah. What did
So
you talked about your first 2 years? So, you're very, very rookie throwing, nothing, but you didn't really have a coach. So, what time frame is this? Because that helps me with like, with YouTube around or not.
ooh, that would have been 2004, 2005.
Okay, so no, because I don't think YouTube really came out until 2006, and it certainly wasn't
No,
ubiquitous like it is today. So, what were you doing to try to improve? You didn't really have a throws coach. There
I
is
would
no
try to go to
YouTube. Yeah.
I would try to go to camps,
Mm.
anything available. The Pendletons lived down the road. They were big throwers. And so I became friends with Emily and Aaron.
Wow.
And so like we kind of all became obsessed, obviously together. And then I kind of still trained on my own with Coach Bates a little bit after my sophomore year. And then I actually went to the John Powell camp my junior year of high school. And I feel like he gave me a completely different perspective on camp. It was like
Mm.
Brian Oldfield, Yuri Sadiq, and John, and I became so enamored with the whole sport, and I just loved it. And John actually became one of my coaches through my collegiate years, like a mentor that continued to help me because he knew that I didn't have a throwing specific coach for such a long time. And so it was pretty cool that, yeah, John became one of my forever mentors, family member,
Yeah.
until he passed away just 2 years ago, year and a half ago.
I'm interested, I think one of the unique aspects, there's lots of unique aspects, but one of the unique aspects in regards to coaching for track and field, you mentioned junior, senior year, you do get a throw specific coach. The person you broke the record by the way, which that's, there's some kind of irony or something going on there. I love that. Maybe she was, well, you already broke the record, but I was going to say, maybe she came in there, as a plot to like sabotage you and it all
So
backfired.
her as
But
well, she didn't have a throws coach either when she was there. So it was pretty cool. She like came in and she knew, and she was a very good support system and all of that. So that was really cool. And obviously records are meant to be broken. So like I'm a firm believer in that with my program as well. Like those records shouldn't be sitting there very long. The bar needs to continue to be set higher. So yeah.
So she had a lot of empathy, like, oh yeah, I know what you're going through
Yeah.
because I went through that. Yeah. But one of the aspects where I was going with that is you talked about I don't want to use the word right. You didn't say rival, but another school's coach said, oh, wow, like you've got potential. I'll help you out. That seems like I've never heard of a baseball coach from another high school going, you know what? kid's got a good swing. I'm going to go work with them. It's always like, nope, man, you over there, because I got to beat you. You're in our county or, conference or whatever. Uh, did you were you able to sense a uniqueness of that as a, call it 16, 17-year-old kid, or was it just like, oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
they're a throws coach, thank God they can come help me?
No, I appreciated every moment of that, because knowing that he had his own team and he's taking time, to help, yes, a rival school, a neighboring school. And I'll be honest, like, he was one of the biggest influences as to why I coach the way I coach now. And so, if there's anyone, like, I can never say no to a kid that wants help throwing. I don't care if they are our rival school. Heck, I have a crazy story from the state meet, but like, they were in 4A. The Tate kid came over. I had been helping him all season because he didn't have a throws coach. And so, of course, I'm like, oh my goodness. And he's in 4A district. He was in our district, he was in our region, and he was in our state. And so a lot of people were like, why are you helping? But I'm just like, the kid doesn't have a coach. Like, he wants to get better. And, because of the way I was, my story and I came up, I felt like I was just compelled to help him. And I'm so glad I did, because at state, he actually ended up locking in and he went top 3 with my boys, and it was a pretty cool story. So
I love that. Again, I just don't hear of swim coaches. I just don't ever, and maybe it's just because I'm not in that world. Maybe it happens all the time, but it just, to me, shows the real selflessness of coaches. You hear about a lot in pole vault, where pole vaulters help each other out. You don't necessarily hear about in other events, but I do know there is that culture in throws specifically as well. So I love that. Awesome. So talk to us about your, you get ready to go through senior year and graduation. You're hopefully thinking of college. What were you thinking? First of all, so where did you end up going, and what were you thinking career-wise at that point? Did you go in thinking you're going to be a coach and go education? Do you think you're going to go become a doctor? Talk to us about what you're thinking academically, professionally.
So I was one of the first family members to actually go ahead and go off to college in my family. So I was very uneducated about the process of going not only to college, but also as an athlete, right? So I had an amazing support system. My mom was like my #1 fan. She was going to get behind whatever I wanted to do. We were just both very clueless in the process of becoming a collegiate athlete. So, I took a couple visits, took one to Ole Miss, took one to the University of Dayton, Bowling Green, all of these, some close to home, some not close to home. Really looked at the, scholarship side, non-scholarship side, walk-on positions, and we were clueless. And so in the end, I ultimately chose the University of Dayton. I loved that it was it was still in state. It had a great education, great academics, and I knew that ultimately the reason that I would be able to be provided such a high academic school is because of track and field. And so I looked at it that way, and I was like, okay, this is an opportunity I probably wouldn't get if it wasn't for track. So I did look at that. And so that's actually where I ended up my first 2 years of my college throwing. And then I ended up transferring, and I had no idea what I wanted to go into. So I was one of those athletes that went in undecided, and I changed my major several times. And then I ended up really realizing that I wanted to actually go into hospitality management, and Kent State had that. So I ended up actually transferring between my sophomore and junior year up to Kent. And I actually was going to just focus on my career, like that path, because I didn't really think that I was going to be able to make it like throwing wise at Kent State, because they have a phenomenal throws program. Coach Fanger is great. One of the best out there. And so I actually ended up getting a call from Coach Fanger, and he was like, hey, like, I heard that you're up here. Like, would you like, and so after, I think Coach Pendleton actually reached out and said, hey, there's a kid on campus that's a thrower. So, and she's not throwing right now. So that was pretty cool.
So lots to unpack there. I love that. This is, I was talking, a lot of people came up to me to talk about the podcast at Nike Nationals last week. And I kept saying the same statement over and over. And it's because it's so true. I hear from a lot of people how much value they get out of the podcast from hearing people's stories. And I will tell you, right back to you, I get more out of this than anybody does. It's so amazing to be in the seat that I am. So love to explore some of the things you said there. So the first thing
Yeah.
is, and so we're going to jump around here a little bit just because it's timely of your story. I love your, first of all, appreciate your authenticity and humbleness to say, hey, you know what? We were just clueless on how do you pick a school? Why do you pick a school, et cetera. Do you find, because we're going to learn as we continue through your journey, you have a lot of kids that go on to college specifically for throwing. And I assume not all your kids go on to throwing, but they hopefully all maybe go on to college if it's appropriate for them. Do you find, this was back in 07, 08 when you graduated high school? Yeah. So 15 years later, are you finding kids and parents still clueless in general, or is it, it's information's much easier to find today, or are kids and parents more educated on the path of how to explore colleges?
I think a little bit of both.
Mm.
It just depends. Are these kids that we're expecting to go to college as an athlete or not? Because I've had a little bit of both
Mhm.
in my coaching career. But I did know that as soon as I was becoming coach and I started realizing, okay, like these athletes can actually go ahead and go on to the next level, I really wanted to be the person that they could turn to. So I've done the most I can to educate myself so I can educate their families so they're not in a position that I was in when I was a senior. And so like a lot of the recruiting for my kids, I like to do for them. I like to talk to the coaches. And personally, I feel like I'm their best advocate because I get to see their work ethic day in and day out. I know parents are great, but like they don't get to see them the way I feel like I see them in an athletic, in their athletic prime and the day to day, their work and all of that. And I think the coaches, I'm hoping appreciate that, like
Mhm.
when I reach out. So I think that's pretty cool. That's one of the things that I've based it around is just my experience myself.
Mhm. Yeah, I just, I sit in a different world now with track and field. I coached for 10 years on the collegiate side, and now not only being on this side in regards to, a manufacturer of track and field equipment, but this side of my track coach advocacy, if you will. And so I think about things differently. So, I'm curious, like I hear a lot of the rumblings of, today's kids, right? Dot, 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 they're lazy, they're entitled, all these kind of things. Yeah. And then I go, especially when I hear like the lazy and they, don't show up for practices, and they want to skip practice all the time for all these, mundane things. And then I look at all the records that are getting broken. I'm like, well, those don't match. You can't be
No,
lazy and all this stuff. And then, we're having, every event, every level is amazing compared to even 10 years ago. Um, and so I'm just curious about when you're looking on the recruiting side, and we're going to talk more about recruiting for sure here in a little bit, but on the recruiting side, do you see them, and we're being general for all your kids, and what you see with the rest of the team with the kids,
mhm,
17, 18-year-old kids, do you see them having like these, what you'll see on the internet, these outreached expectations, meaning they think they all should get full rides? Do they think that, oh, I can make my decisions in June? You hear all the opposite side on the college coaching side of like, hey man, full
right,
rides are rare to not at all. Oh, by the
right.
way, you better make a decision. If someone calls you in the fall, hey, those scholarships are going to be gone come February. You better make a
Yeah.
decision now. What do you see at least your kids' attitudes in
Um,
regards to that?
I feel like earlier in my career, I feel like a lot of kids had a little bit of like just unrealistic expectations.
Mhm.
But then I'm very, very, very transparent with my kids. All of them know the standards, the expectations, what numbers they're hitting, where they can go, what's a realistic possibility for them. They all know that it's very hard to get a full ride in track. If you want a full ride, it's not like football, right? Like every D1 offer from football is a full ride. It's not like that. They all know that because like I said, I stay very, very transparent with them about all of it. I don't want them to be blindsided by any of that. Um, I think I think a lot of I think a lot now because the recruiting has changed so much where, there's walk on and whatnot, and now they're going with the transfer portal and all that. That's changed. I try to keep them all in the loop, like, hey, what was realistic 6 years ago is not anymore.
Mhm.
Transfer portal, getting kids from overseas and whatnot. And so like I have to be, hey, I know that your goal is to only go D1, but this is why I think maybe D2 would be better for you. or, don't be opposed to going D3 or JUCO because, sometimes, even just me getting to know the kids, like, hey, I think you're going to be better off being a big fish in a little pond rather than just getting, absolutely overshadowed by all these other athletes, and I just know how some of my kids kind of react in certain situations. And so it's it's one of my exciting parts all fall is getting to help them get to where they want to be, because I also feel like getting to know these coaches, I know who would be like a really good fit with my kids' personalities and stuff.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's one of those things. And also, like, if I do explain to them, hey, if you can have an opportunity to commit before season, that is huge because, like you said, like a lot of these roster spots get taken up. And if they don't PR, until middle of May,
Mhm.
who knows what's left over? Like, a lot of coaches have already filled their rosters.
Mhm.
So I try to do all of that in the summer and the fall for them, and hopefully, like, try to get some visits and options lined up for the fall. So I pray that they can, have a decision by February, March.
Yeah, got it.
But sometimes it doesn't happen like that, and that's okay.
That's right. I think that's important to hear that it doesn't happen all that time, which we all know that part. But then the second part, that's really important what you just said there. And that's okay.
Mhm.
Making a decision in December or February is not for everybody. Sometimes it takes June, July. Heck, I've heard plenty of stories of people that didn't have their college decision until August, and it was
No.
the best thing that ever happened. And God bless
Yep.
if you don't know by August. Holy cow!
Yeah.
So the other part, you mentioned you went to the University of Dayton, great school, great program there, and then transferred. And it sounded like, if I want to make sure I heard it right, you didn't transfer because I'm necessarily unhappy with my throwing coach, and so I want to go to Kent State and be with Coach Fenger. By the way, Gill podcast alum, love him very, very much. It sounded more of like a culmination of a lot of other things, maybe academics,
Mhm.
maybe location, et cetera, to transfer. They didn't even know you were on campus.
No. No, because I was like, no, I probably don't need to go up there. I was like, I think I left Dayton throwing 150, 152 feet in disc, and that's not it's not super far. So going into the MAC, I was like, it's just really not going to do anything. So that was just my confidence being down about where I was in my throwing career. But I was
Yeah,
super
because
thankful that
that's crazy, Emily. When you said I left throwing, I thought, oh, she's going to say like 120 or 130, 150, and you're like, yeah, probably not good enough. Seriously,
yeah.
I know you look
So
back now and you're like, what was I thinking? But come on,
yeah, I
yeah,
think
oh
that
my,
just goes with the whole, like, because I kind of, up until then, kind of, it was me. Like, I didn't have a huge team of like throwers. There was two girls on my whole, like, in high school and everything like that. So I think that was just kind of left over from there. But no, I ended up going in my junior year. I trained all off season, did all of the things I needed to, and then got mono in January. And my spleen was so enlarged that they wouldn't clear me, and so it ended my career. Anyway.
wait, so you didn't actually get to throw for a finger? And
No,
no
I was on the
way.
team. I did all of the things. I was ready for spring. I went through the indoor process. I did everything that I needed to do. I was throwing the best I'd ever thrown. I looked, felt, I was strong, all of the things, because his program's phenomenal. And then, yeah, my career ended anyway.
Dude.
Yeah. So I actually had to go home. I actually wasn't even in college for that whole semester because my spleen was so enlarged and it was such a severe case. So yeah. Yeah.
So
So
what, so this is interesting, you've got, and this is common, my experience, especially coaching female. I always just say when I coached males, and these are big generalizations here, but when I coached males, they all thought they were the gold medal winners. And and I had to like knock them down off the pedestal a little bit. And like, you got to put in some work before you get that. For women, they all, again, generalizations here, mostly felt like, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't win, she's better. And so it was always a constant uplifting, which I much more preferred, by the way, coaching women and always uplifting. So with you hearing the story of like, yeah, I was throwing 150, I can't make it in the MAC. By the way, I used to coach in the MAC, so I know what 150 could and cannot do in the MAC. I was there in 01 and 02 at Ball State, so I had to throw against Kent State a lot, by the way. But now you go there, coach reaches out. I love Coach Pendleton. I don't know him personally. I think I've met him once or twice, but what a great advocate for specifically our events of throwing. Obviously a great family of throwers as well. But I love that he reached out kind of, I don't want to say on your behalf, like you asked him, he just did it like, hey,
Yeah, he
hey,
just did it.
there's
Yeah, because I was
someone
caught
on
off guard.
campus. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome advocacy for young people. Love that. Coach Finger reaches out. I assume you were probably a little like, really? You think I could be? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right, I'll try it. You go,
Yeah.
you're having you're training, and then get sick.
Yeah.
And now your career's, I can't imagine. I mean, we're still talking about, this is probably 20, maybe not even 21 years old. You're a very, very young person. I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster that you're going through. What talk to me about I'm gonna call it your mental state of when you finally got word of like, hey, you're done. We just, because of the health and fear
Yeah.
of your safety, we're just going to be done throwing for you. I'm sorry. I mean, what are the thoughts going through your head?
In my mind, I think well, I was raised by a single mom. So she was like, hey, like if you're not out there for track, if you're not putting in that work, you need to go get a job. So it's like one of those things. You need to go to get a job and go to school, all of the things, which fully respect. I understand why, all the things, right? Like how I was raised. And so I was like, okay, like I'm going to ultimately have to take a semester off of school to get my health back to normal. And then by the time, like, cause it took me almost 8 months, like I mean, I'm just very lucky that nothing more severe happened because I guess it was a very severe case with my spleen. So I had doctors in and out, whatever. And so they were just like, yeah, they're like, it's better off to take off. So I was like, I accepted that after however many doctors I had to talk to. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to get ready and go for my career now. And just, and obviously that hurt because track throwing had been a part of my life since 8th grade. It was an outlet for me. It was everything essentially for me. It was my motivation for academics. It was everything, and I think that's sports for a lot of kids, whether we, realize it or not. A lot of kids.
Whether that's healthy or not, it
Yeah.
becomes our identity.
Yeah,
By the way, the
it does.
same thing has happened and continues to happen with coaches, by the way. Literally had
Yeah.
this conversation last night at dinner with a coach of we make coaching our number one role. And again, there's no bigger fan of track coaches than this guy. I'll tell you that maybe it's your fourth best, most important role because there's for you specifically, you're a daughter, you're a mom, you're a wife. I'm sorry, those are way more important roles than coaching. And again, no one's a bigger fan of the coaching side of you than this guy right here. So yeah, we make it our identity. So yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you're exactly right. We make it our identity, and that's not healthy. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that kind of led me to how I ended up down here. Had my internship on my in the hospitality management world.
Okay, so wait there. Of course, it was in Destin. Yeah, as soon as you said that, it's like it has to be in Destin. So did you end up getting your degree from Kent?
Yep.
Okay,
I did.
so you got hospitality management. So you didn't. I was fully expecting you to say, since I couldn't throw, I asked Coach Finger, can I help? Can I? I became a volunteer assistant. You just track at that point.
I think for my mental state, yeah, because I think the more I was around it, it just hurt that I couldn't go, so it's just like, okay, I just need to focus now on my career, why I'm in school, all of the things, and just kind of bust my butt that way. And that's what I did. I put everything into my career that way then. And I just went that direction. Ended up coming down here.
Wow.
Yeah. On my internship, met my husband during my internship.
Yeah.
And we had been together ever since, got married. And now we have 3 beautiful boys. Isn't
that crazy? You're telling it, and maybe you're being 100% transparent. Sometimes there's just more, call it a layer behind. Because you said it right. I from the way you're telling the story, 8th grade, you pick up the discus. It definitely seems like you went all in on throwing and specifically the discus at that point. It helps take you to college. It looks like it's over at the end of Dayton, but then there's this, call it the light at the end of the tunnel. There's another chance, and that's taken from you because of health. And then you tilt the story to, so I finished out my academics and, interned and, found my husband and blah, blah. I'm not sure regret is the right word. Sadness of like, man, it's my senior year. I should have been throwing, go down to my internship down to Destin. maybe I could have made the trials or whatever, anything of that, or were you able to completely divorce yourself of that role of a thrower?
No, I don't think
Okay.
anybody ever does.
Okay. All right. That's where I was
And
trying to
that's
get
why
to.
I'm
Okay.
where I'm right now. But I think I became a young mom. Then, I was a young wife, a young mom.
Mhm.
I had just had my son, and they're only 13 months apart. So I had a 1 and a 2-month old
Mhm.
at that time. And I was like, oh my goodness. I just feel like, obviously, I love being a mother, I love being a wife, but I just feel like something else is missing. And so I reached out to Niceville because I noticed that they didn't have a throws coach. And I was like, like, this will be good. Like, this could be my own thing. I can get back into like the throwing. And I reached out and I was just like, hey, I noticed you don't have a throws coach. Like, I'd love on help. Like, you guys have anybody? I think I noticed they had like 2 throwers or something like that. Kind of where my whole career started.
Wow. So
Just
why
like
did
that.
why did you reach out to Niceville as opposed to a middle school or a club during the summer, or I don't know, why
I'll
them
be honest.
specifically?
I'll be honest. I had no idea where I lived. I had no idea. I knew that the water was blue. It was beautiful. I knew that I was in a destination area. I'm from Ohio.
Right,
Okay. So
right, right, right.
down here to Destin, it's beautiful, but I had no idea what the heck Bill was. Like it sounded like a town across the bridge. Um, I didn't know anything about Fort Walton. My husband graduated from Walton County. So he was like, I knew that just because I knew that's where he graduated from. And in my mind, I probably should have been like, oh, I should go where my husband graduated from. But I was like, no, I'm gonna go to the one high school that I guess in my mind, just not knowing anything about the area, kind of stood out as what was closest to Fremont, Ohio I could get. And I like just the quaint town feel of it not feeling like a beach town, I loved because it had football. It was a quieter town, and I liked that. And I think that just took me back to my roots. And so that's ultimately why I chose Niceville. I had no idea that in this area, Niceville was like the sports school that it was, to be honest, because
Yeah.
that's not what I was looking for. I was just looking to go help out some throwers.
And you must have done some research because you talked about Niceville didn't have a throws coach. And, one of the things that irks me is, I can go to any college. I mean, literally 99.9% of any college, I can go and I can find a website that lists their college, the coaches and their positions, things like that. 99% of high school websites, I can't find it at all. At all. So you had to have done some asking around or calling. How did you figure out that Niceville was the place that might needed some help?
I was sitting at home just on the computer in between 2 children
Mhm.
at on the clock, mom clock, and I just noticed that, they just had, like, the distance coach, at the time, which was Jamie listed, and so I just emailed him, and that's all that was on there, and so I just emailed him, and then I remember, um, I didn't hear back from him for a while, and then I got a random call probably like 2 or 3 months later, from Todd Brigman, who he was just in his first year coaching. He had moved over from Tallahassee, and he took on co-head coach role with Jamie LaFollette. And he was like, "Hey," he's like, "I heard you reached out to the position. Like, I need to meet you." And so I went over there with 2 kids in tow. I met my first few throwers, which I did not know at that time that those were going to be the start of what has become what they call Throwsville, like all of that. And it was just it's cool looking back on it because Ed Shelikoff ended up going to the University of Florida, and I met him going into his junior year. He ended up throwing 200 the next year. I met him throwing 130 feet. So it just kind of it all just happened so perfectly. And that is where I started my coaching career, and that is where I'm still currently. Like I am not going into year 10.
What, there pros and cons to that coaching, and specifically coaching track and field has an extremely low barrier of entry. There's the con side of it is people will say, anybody can hang the shingle outside and call themselves coach. The pro side of it is, well, that allows what has become a lot of amazing coaches to have positive impacts on young people because there isn't this huge barrier. I'm sure many people probably would have been great doctors in their world, but the barrier to entry to being a doctor is extremely high. Coaching doesn't have that. What gave you, hopefully you can get the sense that this podcast is not gotcha journalism. So this question is going to sound a little aggressive, but it's not meant to be. What gave you I'm use the audacity word. What gave you the audacity to think that you could coach? Meaning, and not that being a great athlete and being a 4 to 5 year college athlete means you can coach or not coach, but you had a fairly, I don't want to call it lackluster, a tumultuous college career. 2 years at Dayton, you thought you were going to come back into Kent, then health. What made you think, you know what, I know I don't, because you really don't have that much throwing experience, and you certainly don't have, you had some good people pour into you, I know that, but you didn't have like a consistent high school, you didn't have you as a high school coach for all 4 years, right? So you kind of cobbled together this, what you know about discus, and coaching throws is extremely different than throwing the throws. I know you learned some things, but that's different. What made you think, you know what, I think I am a track coach, a throws coach, so I'm going to call Niceville up?
Well, I think one, I wanted to be a coach that I didn't have for someone else. I think that was like, I wanted to be able to not right the wrongs. I guess it sounds like not necessarily that, but I always think back, what if I did have a coach that pushed me or made me uncomfortable to make me better, that expected more out of me, that set the bar high, you know what I mean? Like in a different way, right? Like, cause I had coaches that were like that, but like in a different way. And I wanted to do that for somebody else. I also, to me, I feel like I love being able to give back. I love being maybe like a source of safe place for like these kids, high schoolers, like I love that, a family aspect. But I think ultimately John Powell had the biggest influence on that because I loved the way he coached. I love that he was so transparent and very real about how he coached and the movements. And he really just was able to relate. Like if someone wasn't getting something one way, he could say it in a different way so everybody could understand. And I think what I learned too from him and just over coaching is like throwing is not a one size fits all. It's literally so different for every person. And I just felt like I don't know, I just felt like, even because I only thought I was going to coach 3 people also. Like when it first started, there was 3 people. And I went out, and before I actually got the job, I just helped them a little bit before they went to their state meet. And I remember Ed telling me like, oh my gosh, coach, like I literally just gained like 20 feet off of what you helped me with. Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I did that, like, and I was like, that's really cool that I'm so glad like I was able to help him like that. And then I remember him and Coach Brigman just being like, you have to come back, like you have to. And so that was the start of like my coaching career. And I just felt like, I don't know, it's hard to answer that, but yeah, I felt like I could do that for more than just Ed.
Yeah, I wrote down the quote of what you just said there. I wanted to be a coach that I didn't have. Gill podcast alum Marissa Chu at TCU has made that statement on social media. I think the way she phrases it is, be the coach that you always wished you had. And personally, same thing. I didn't have great high school coaches. I love them to death. They were amazing human beings. They just didn't know how to coach. I had this is going to sound terrible, actually. I had a throws coach as a head coach, and he had no idea.
No idea.
I look back at what I know they didn't throw to, by the way, and he didn't know what he was doing there either. But I love him, Dennis Anderson. I know you're not listening, but I love you to death. He's a Troy State alum, and I'm a big Troy. You know this, so
Yeah.
Always shout out to my Troy alums there. But I remember when I first started to get into coaching, when I had the audacity to think, and I wasn't a college athlete for crying out loud, so I didn't even have that. I just had 4 years of being a very poor high school runner. That when I had the audacity to get into coaching, I was like, I don't want it to be I don't want to be the reason why a kid doesn't maximize whatever God-given talent that they have. It's going to have to be because they decided to stay up till 1 a.m. or they decided to skip practice. It's going to be their reason, their fault that they don't maximize their ability, not me, and therefore my lack of knowledge. So I went hardcore into coaching education type stuff. But it was kind of that same vein of just like, man, my coaches didn't know what they were doing. And we were in a time frame even before you in regards to how hard it was to find coaching education. And we certainly didn't have clinics. And we were in, you were in very small town Ohio. I was the southern version of that. I was in a very small town Alabama. There was just the track wasn't important, football was, and everything else was to the wayside. So I just love that. I wanted to be a coach that I didn't have. I think a lot of coaches resonate with that.
Yeah.
I really do. I love that. Okay. So you start helping out at Niceville the first year, and then they're like, hey, you got to come back. You think, this is 10 years ago. It's impossible to ever see. I hate that question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know. Maybe I win the lottery. I have no idea. You certainly can't see. You got 3 athletes in front of you. You can't see what we're going to learn here as we move along 10 years. So how did it start? Talk to us about that beginning. Talk to us about the like, I'm going to call it the pre-beginning, the coming in and helping out before the state meet. Now you come back. I'm gonna call this your real year one, your full year one.
Yeah.
How did you prepare for year one? And what were some of the, you look back now, these are the things I had to lay the groundwork for in year one.
There was no sort of lifting regimen for the throwers. So I wrote a whole lifting program for this small group that I had. Like I said, I had 3 kids. Mm-hmm. My first encounter with the throws here.
On those 3, and the only reason I asked this question because I'm asking it for like the influence of football. 3 boys, 2 girls. What was
2 boys, 1 girl, no football players.
Oh, okay. That was my next question: is were there 2 football players? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool because I was like, okay, this is, Ed was one of my main, and I had a girl named Skylar, and she was a weightlifter, but she never had any direction in the throws. And so my biggest thing was like, hey, it's not just about being in the ring throwing, you have to build a base outside of the ring as well. And that's in the weight room. So started with that.
Were you a big weight? I'm sorry. I always cut off people. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Were you I'm gonna say big lifter?
Whatever lifting I did in high school, and I say that very lightly, I never lifted in high school. And so that was one of the biggest things where I was like, oh my goodness, if I would have lifted in high school, holy smokes, what would I have done?
So where did you learn? Because you're talking about, this is one of the first things you did is like, hey, we got to get a weight room program in here.
College.
You didn't lift. And it's crazy that it's 2024, and certainly I assume it's better today in 2024 than it was in 2004 and 1984. But we still crazily have a little bit of a women don't lift, just go and throw or go do your basketball or volleyball, whatever sport you're in. Where in boys athletics, it doesn't matter what sport you're playing. Oh yeah, so of course you're going to be in the weight room. That should be the attitude towards our female athletes as well. Where did that come from that you were like, oh gosh, I missed out on this. I should have been lifting all through high school, etc. Yeah. Okay.
I would say college, because I just saw how much my body changed, to the strength behind my throws, the technique, the more body awareness I had from lifting and all of that. And I mean, granted, we lifted, I would say I don't know. Yes, we lifted in high school, but it was not to where you're gaining much. It just wasn't at the same level, right? And
wasn't like programmatic. It was just like, yeah, go lift or something like
oh,
that.
hey, if you have a couple of minutes, go do a couple of power cleans, or you don't squat, don't worry about it.
Right.
Stuff like that. And I think that also came with the fact that I was on my own training schedule with being a thrower, and then it's I wasn't with the rest of the team how throwers typically are. And so all of that, and so that was just one of the foundations that I wanted to build in my program, for the throwers for Niceville. And that's kind of where we started, is just the weight room, and then a lot of technical stuff. So a lot of, drills. I introduced them to John. John came to to Niceville for, I think it was his last 2 ever camps that he ever did before he retired camps, but he flew out and he got to meet all of my kids. So at this time, my program started to grow. I think my second year I had about 10 kids. because I started to get these freshmen.
You're not teaching.
No, just stay at home mom.
So how are you, first of all, and other people have heard me say this, you have to remove 2 words from your lexicon, the words just and only, because it belittles what you say after it. Meaning you just said, nope, just a stay-at-home mom. That belittles what stay-at-home moms do. By the way, it's just mom, by the way. You got to take that out. I battle this every time for NCAA championships. We do we have gifts that we give out to coaches and stuff. And I'll say something like, oh, how many kids did you get qualified coach? And invariably a coach will say, oh, only 1 or just 1. And I'm like, what? Do you know how many people don't have any? Like 1 is huge. What's happening here is it's that comparison kills joy. It's for the coaching side of it. It's like, oh, only 1 because they see this school has 30 or this school has 15, etc. That doesn't matter. That's that school. That has nothing to do with you. Take away just and only. Same thing for you. What you just did there was comparison of someone who's a director of marketing at a hotel or something. It's like, oh, I'm just a stay-at-home. Bull crap. Those kids, they wouldn't say that's just my mom. That's mom, husband, same thing. Come on now. So take away just and only out of your dictionary. Please continue your story now. I'm very passionate about that.
No, good. Thanks.
So I didn't even ask my question. Sorry, I interrupted my own question.
I know, I forget where I was.
You're not teaching. So how did you, because we've had other high school coaches on here and they talk about how hugely important it is to recruit the hallways. So how are you going from 3 to 10? How you're not in the hallways?
So our head coach had a lot to do with that. Todd Brigman. He was a teacher, all of the things. So he's in the hallway and he's just like, oh my goodness, like you should just try to go throw. It also was awesome because by word of mouth with Ed's success, his first 2 seasons with me, he pulled out friends, right? Like, and then we were starting to get younger kids that had interest, like the freshmen and the sophomore. So I started with it was probably Ed's senior year. My second year, I had a full group of like freshmen. I had a couple sophomore and a couple juniors that were interested. And they kind of paved that way for what it's become. I took.
Are you starting to get other sport athletes now? Football, volleyball, basketball? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
More so on the girls' side. I started to get like some volleyball players and whatnot. But I think one of the coolest stories, and I think it brought awareness to a lot of kids that just felt like maybe they weren't excelling in like another sport or they were burnt out or whatnot, was I had a junior. He was a junior with Ed as well. And he came out to throw just because he was Ed's friend. His name was Heath. And he was horrible. And he knew it. And I love him. He's like one of my favorite humans.
He's listening right now going, dude.
Yeah. No, well, we joked because he was like, this is rough. And I joked. I was like, you're going to be the water boy. And like, and he's like, coach. And he's like, no, I'm going to get better at this. And I was like, no, if you want to get better, it's all about how much you want to put into it. And that's what I love about throwing is if you want to be the best, or if you want to accomplish something, it's about what you want to put into it. I'm here for it. Right. Like, but I can't do it for you. So this kid worked his butt off for the next year, and in the weight room, I mean, he drilled whatnot, and he ended up qualifying for state his senior year, scored with Ed. Ed got second. He got 8th on the podium, and he ended up going to Troy, and he threw for Troy all 4 years.
Of course, former water boy is the one who goes to Troy. I love you, Heath, by the way. If you are listening, I don't care what she just said. You went to the greatest university in the world.
Yeah, that was between him and Ed's story, his senior year, and like how all of that unfolded. I think those were just 2 huge moments in my coaching career that really showed me like, oh my goodness, like I really want to do this. Because I saw Heath's whole process, right, over the year. I saw the tears of like happiness that he had accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. And I was just like, I want to do this for like every kid that comes out. And so I feel like I wanted to be their support system. And so that's kind of where I feel like the whole story started, was with those 2 kids. And I feel like that's been the standard since then.
Yeah, I want to ask what was, if there was a defining moment for him from coaching to becoming a program, and this sounds like it was these 2 very different athletes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
One had like the more natural, development, and then the other one had to really work for it. But they were both equally, to me, equally successful because they got to
Yeah.
exactly where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What are you doing this early part? Well, kind of let's take the 10 years and kind of split them in half. And so for the first 5 years, as you're building the program, what are you doing coaching education wise? Now you've got, obviously you got John Powell on speed dial, things like that. Are you going to any camps or clinics or any USATF, USTFCA coaching education, anything like that?
So every year we go to the Florida coaching conference. So like I always, to me, I'm like, okay, like I need to fill my toolbox up with as much as I can. Like I am humble enough to know that like the only things I know are not the only things that are correct. And so I always tell my kids like, hey, like take it all in and use what works for you. Right. And so obviously I have a big base of what I believe, they need to build their foundation. And so a lot of my stuff was drills, like I added in drills. A lot of kids don't like to do drills, but drills are so pivotal. Running, like a lot of throwers don't think running's like a real thing that exists for them, but like I'm a firm believer in short sprints and explosiveness. So like to me, like that was all added in. And then it's like obviously during season we start to throw. So and then we put it all together. And so that's kind of where I was. And every summer I do like to introduce my kids to like some sort of different perspective. So we traveled up to Ohio for John's last Denison camp, my first year. And then the next 2 years, John came down. I've taken my kids to Ironwood out in Idaho. We have gone, I mean, heck, we had Joe Kovacs and Ashley Kovacs to the facility in December. So I've been very, very honored and blessed to have a lot of great mentors. Dana Pounds-Lyon out at Air Force, I went and we became really good friends, coaching mentor as well in the javelin. I've taken my kids to Air Force camp. So I try because I think I know how much John's camp changed my life and my perspective. And I guess just my throwers need to see that there's other throwers out there, right? And there's other kids that have the same goals just like them because we're just such a small group sometimes. And I think, in the track world, we get forgotten about sometimes as well. And, that's just the reality of it. And so I think they learn, okay, like we're going to buy in and love this from like a different perspective, and camps help with that. And just getting to meet different coaches and different athletes with the same love of a sport.
How do you find that? How do you find some of these things that you're doing and have discernment that they're good ideas? And what I mean by that, there's a lot of different ways to run and grow a program. So I know of some coaches that, find the Navy SEAL type training, and that's how they build a program, and they've had success with it. Other coaches, you're describing a way of like, hey, I'm going to show them that there's a world outside of Niceville throws, that there is, there's other kids and other coaches and other opportunities. We're going to go to the Ironwood. We're going to go to here, there. How do you find those, and how do you discern what's right for because you're doing 100 things, but there's 1,000 options out there for you. So how do you discern for your program?
Honestly, communication per each kid, because like I said earlier, what works for, some doesn't work for others. So I like to see like, hey, how, like my kids make fun of me all the time because I'm like, how did that feel? How did that feel? Because I don't know. I'm not throwing it, right? So I think a lot of stuff, like I use so many different things, but I mainly use like certain things for each kid. So just like same with like the weightlifting, it started a little bit more watered down, I would say, compared to what it is now 10 years ago. But I noticed that their progression and their feedback is what I would kind of revisit every year. So like if it worked, then let's go ahead, add a little bit more and see if we can improve off of what the team did last year, right? And so like every year I like to add or mix it up or modify it or make something a little bit different, but in a positive way. So I feel like that's kind of where it's become or it's gotten to. And so every year I try to raise the bar for the program in general. And for myself, like as a coach, like I like to have goals myself, like, okay, like, let's go. Like, we had this many kids get to state, like, no, we're going to like, just, as a coach, like you have coaching goals,
Mhm.
so.
So let's move maybe to the last 5 years. Talk to us about, we started with 3 athletes, grew to 10. Give us kind of the status of today's, it changes it on year to year, obviously. And we don't even know what 2025 season is going to look like for you right now. How many throwers have you brought in an assistant coach to help you because you got 100 throwers? Certainly during your 10 years, we've added javelin. So that's a whole new
Yeah.
wrinkle that you didn't even do as an athlete. Talk to us about what is the status of the program. You have a cool name, so that's always cool, Throwsville. So how did that come about? Talk to us about today's status of the program.
I feel like the throw started becoming pretty dominant in our program probably 6 years ago, where we started getting a lot of, points at state and whatnot. So like the announcer kind of like came up with that and started
Cool.
calling us Throwsville. And so it's one of those things that every time we go to the big meets, they announce it and I'm like, oh, please don't do it. Like, but it's fine because it like makes all my kids just like they're in the ring and they're like, Throwsville's here. They're like, I'm like, it's fine, ignore it. But it's pretty cool, and it's I don't know, it's cool that it's become that. I'm about up to an average of 50 throwers a year.
Well, hold on. We must have gotten a little
Yeah,
disconnected or something. It sounded like you said 50, but you must have meant
yes,
15 because 15 is a lot as well.
50.
50?
Yeah, and I do coach the throws solely by myself.
In high school. So if you were to do this in college, you would do, and this is very typical, you would have a 9 a.m. practice, a 10 a.m. practice, 11 a.m. practice. Maybe you treat yourself and you have lunch at noon, then a 1, a 2, and a 3. These kids have mandatory classes during the day.
Yeah.
How are you running 50 kids through shot, discus, and javelin on the high school level?
Well, I was at one disc cage and one shot ring for a while.
Oh,
I would
wow. Okay.
say in 2020, I was gracious. Like my parents, our coach, like we raised money. I now have 11 discus rings, and 4 shot put rings. And then for javelin, we just use grass. So we don't have a runway or anything for that. So I use our football field, practice football field. But so with that being said, my facility has allowed more athletes to come in for training. I like to set up my practice times, typically right after school. I like to have more of my developmental kids or kids that are newer that need to like focus more on the little things. They're out there for about an hour and a half and then they lift. Then I have my more advanced kids that come out. They typically train for about 2.5, 3 hours in the rings, working on a lot of fundamentals, but also getting the reps in, the volume of the throws in, because I'm a firm believer in lots of reps. Practice makes perfect kind of thing. Also, they hit the weight room, and then I usually typically 2 days a week have more intense javelin practice. So I would say that I don't get home until really late, but yeah. So my coffee maker and my refrigerator full of water out in my fields has helped a lot.
How's the relationship? When I was down there, I left before I went to high school, but for Walton High, I lived right across the street from essentially from Choctawhatchee High School, Niceville. Those were all, football is very, very important in that state and very much in that panhandle. How is the relationship with football coaches in regards to, I'm going to call it sharing athletes, but I really hate that term, to be honest with you, because that means ownership, but of athletes that want to do both sports.
In the years past, it's actually, so we had a head coaching change at our high school, and the first head coach was very like against any kids doing track. The second coach came in, and he's been a much better advocate for track and sees like the positivity behind. Okay, like our big boys need to go do some throws and whatnot. And I think that kind of just has happened on its own anyway with the growth of the program. So a lot of like my kids, like I found that if I've had them since 7th or 8th grade, they come over and they already want to throw. And then now, their football guys want to come throw. They've seen the success of it. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's more of a natural progression where it's like we don't really have to fight over it. Um, you know, I've been lucky enough that our program has succeeded the way it has. And so like a lot of like the last 4 years, we've won 4 state titles on the boys side. And in 21, 22, and 23. And even this past year, the throws points have been so dominant that these boys are seeing like, oh my goodness, like I could go have success as well, not just on the football field, but I can go have major success at the track side as well. And a lot of these kids that, don't necessarily have an opportunity to continue in football, a lot of them who thought they were going to be football guys in college have gone on now and continued to advance to the collegiate level in the throws. And so I think a lot of the kids are seeing like, oh, well, when one door of opportunity closes, I still do have another opportunity. And I think that's one of the coolest parts. And that's why I do love to advocate so much for my kids, because I know that if they're coming over to work with me, then they know, because now the bars have been set so high. Even the football guys, like they just know, like they're not going to come over just to have fun. Like they're coming over to work hard.
You mentioned 6th and 7th and 8th grade middle school kids. Are you coaching down into the middle school, or is that a completely other coach? And
I'm actually I'm the head coach of the middle school.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've heard this from a couple of coaches, and it's never a high school coach that's struggling. It's always a high school coach that's thriving, that has some sphere of influence on the middle school side. I'm reminded of here in Illinois, Coach Marcus Lowe from Kankakee, also Gill podcast alum. He has the title, and there's only, I think, a handful. I certainly haven't heard of very many, of director of track and field for Kankakee High School, and that reaches down into the middle school. So the middle school kids, when they join track, are running his program from the get-go, from 6th grade. So when they get to high school, it's not, they have to learn, he's a sprints coach. They have to now learn a new system. They're doing some other system in middle school. And Kankakee has won many state titles now, and sends a lot of kids to college, very similar to your throws program. So you're actually, if a kid joins track in, say, 6th grade, they're getting the Coach Emily Webb philosophy of how to throw from there. So
I will say I keep it very watered down, and
sure,
it's more about having fun.
No, of course, but
yes,
but your terminology is the same. You may, what you call a circle or a turn is
correct.
the same. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, of course. I would hope, if you were like, oh yeah, from day one, we're drilling 100 throw. I'm like, oh man, those kids are like, screw this, I'm going to football. It's easier, for crying out loud. Yeah. No. I hope that would be the case. I'm talking about just terminology, expectations. They're seeing the high schoolers having success, so that it's like, oh man, I can't wait till I get to do this drill or whatnot. They're seeing maybe the older kids do a little bit higher level drills, etc. Yeah. That's cool. That's interesting. That sphere of influence over the middle school side, and how it really ramps up the success, the potential for success, at least on the high school side. It really does. Because you think about it, if you're only doing high school, you're at best, you're getting 4 years of training with them. A lot of times you're getting 3 or less, because they're not coming out freshman year, or maybe not till junior, or heck, even I've seen plenty of kids not coming out till senior year to do things like that. So that's interesting. I love that. So what, if you look back in these last 10 years, and it's really amazing to me, I did not know 10 years only, because, that's a real, that's still rookie territory as far as like, length of coaching. I would have thought, because I've seen the success through social media and stuff with you. I would have thought like, this is year 15 or 20. She's been doing this since she was 10, for crying out loud. What have you, when you look back at year 1 to, you're ramping into year 11 here, what are you most proud of that you've changed? We ask our athletes to change a lot of things, whether it's their diet habits or their practice habits, sleep habits, etc. You have changed for the positive. When you look back, what's something that I'm gonna ask it this way: what's something you look back in year 1 and you're like, oh man, that's so cringe. I can't believe I used to do X, or I didn't know Y back then, etc. What's something, your progression for your coaching, that you're most proud of and glad you either do now or don't do anymore?
In regards to my program, I think more of just like really implementing like how the kids feel. Cause like I've noticed that like, I feel like growing up as coaching, it's like you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? And the kids just listen. And I think one of the coolest things as a coach, growing as a coach, is, hey, like the feedback, the relationships building. It's not just about the coaching part of it. It's about how you build the relationship, the throwing family, all of that. And as much as we still had a family at the beginning of my coaching career, I feel like it's become so tight knit to where my throwers, it doesn't matter, they come from all walks of life, right? Like all different interests, all different friend groups. They are such a unit. And I think that's one of my proudest moments as like a coach is like I can sit back and I'm like, oh my gosh, they make me so proud as like being there for one another, and like they're thick as thieves. Like when they go to a meet, their presence is somewhat intimidating sometimes because, just for instance, like I had 4 of my discus boys at the state meet competing. Um, and I had 15 other throwers standing on the fence cheering them on and that had made it. And I like took a step back in that moment and I was like, what a cool freaking view this is, because they're all there. And I feel for some of those kids that like are just there by themselves and they don't have anybody cheering them on. But I think that's one of my coolest and my most proud things about the program. Along with, I feel like after my first 2 seasons, seeing like how the FHSAA functioned and all the stuff, because I'm an Ohio girl, so things are ran a lot differently. It was a really big goal of mine to just bring more awareness to the throws in general in the state of Florida, and I feel like I've successfully been able to do that
Hmm.
over the last couple years. And so I just hope it continues in a positive way.
You know what you just described there, by the way?
I don't.
I could boil all that down to one word. You just defined culture. The culture you have that you've built there. First of all, 4 discus throwers. Many teams don't have 4 athletes at the state meet. And then to have, 15, 20 other athletes that didn't qualify for state, because, as good as you are, Emily, not everybody's going to qualify for state, right? Other kids have to play too, Emily. Don't take away all the spots at state, okay? But it was such a team. So this is where we talk about the individual versus the team aspect of track. Even though they didn't individually qualify, their brothers, their sisters did. So we're going to go and celebrate. We're going to go cheer them on. And they go to state to do that's culture. That is the true track team aspect of it all. I love that. That's really cool. How much, I can't help. I thought about this question earlier as you're describing, what you do and how you do it and how you've done it. How much do you think you're clearly a very intelligent, technical side of things, and I think that's important. But I get the sense, cultures I don't think is built around technical efficiencies. I don't think that it's a maybe a small sliver of culture, but I don't think you can build a Throwsville high school on technique and technical proficiencies. So how much, and I kind of just led the question there, I apologize, but how much do you think the success that you've had, and that's not just, a state champion or 4 kids in the discus, I'm talking about having 50 kids. To me, the 50 kids is the most impressive part. 50 throwers is the most impressive part. How much of that is that success is born on because you've become a great coach, you've listened to mentors like John Powell, gone to clinics, now you're speaking at clinics for crying out loud, which I think that's a form of education as well. When you get to have to teach others, that helps you become better. How much of it is that versus you also seem to be a very I believe in you type of person? Like I can kind of get the sense of like I don't want to, because this is kind of a I believe this is a little bit of a sexist kind of remark here, so forgive me. But it feels very mama bearish. I don't like that because no one ever says papa bearish, by the way, with a male coach. That's why I kind of don't like saying that. But you seem like a very I believe in you type of coach. How much of your success is predicated on I've become a pretty technical coach. I'm always getting better, but I know how to coach discus and shot and now javelin. And how much of it is, my kids know that I 100% have their back and believe in them. How much, what percentage would you equate to either to those two? And is there a third thing that I just missed?
No, I think that's true. Like my kids 100% know I do have their back.
Mhm.
Like I will be the first person to like speak up for them, stand up for them. If something's wrong, I will make it right. Like anything like that, as much as I can possibly do. It to the track meets, like I'm their advocate. Like I always tell them, when you're away from home, I want this to be your second home. Like I want to be your biggest advocate and do it. And the thing is like I've noticed just being like that naturally, and I guess that's also filling in where that coach that all of that,
Mhm.
they do the same for me, right? So like they go in blood, sweat, tears, Coach Webb, like, no, I don't want to let Coach Webb down. I want to do this for our team. Like, you know, the throwers in general have had a lot of pressure the last few years because the first year, um, the boys' point score was like 50. I think it was like 53 of the total throws points at the state title, right? So of course that's a lot of pressure to put on the next team, and they followed up with 68 points of the state total, right, just in the throws. And so after those 2 years, those kids graduated. Well, now I have a whole new group of kids. Well, I have to show them, like, hey, just because they did it doesn't mean you can't do it, right? Like, you guys are continuing the foundation that they've set down and they've started with this program. Let's go. Like, you guys step up. And so I feel like that's now like the belief system, like in our program, is it's like, okay, they've started this, now we can continue. And last year it was a whole new group of thrower boys and thrower girls, and they came and they did exactly what the 2021 and 2022 team, and they did it in 2023, and they continued this year in 2024. And just with making history, I guess, and at a state meet with the throws points. And I couldn't be more proud of them, because it is very stressful after a couple of years knowing that they have a lot of that to carry on their shoulders. But I know that as a family aspect that we have, and them knowing that, hey, like, you've got this and I'm there for them, like, that's what they need to hear. They don't need to say, like, hey man, like, if you mess up, like, you're trash. Like that's not really like how you can get a thrower to respond. Like, there's so many technical mental aspects of throwing, I feel like a lot of people don't know about, that if you crush their mental, you're crushing their throw.
Yeah, for sure.
So
You could probably take the word throw and throwers out of that. Any athlete, any human, to be real frank,
yeah,
with our, my sales team here, it's same thing. If I crush them, well,
yeah,
they're
what are they doing?
what are they
Yeah.
doing? Right, exactly. Hey, so how when we started this podcast 5 years ago, by the way, right before COVID started, to me, I never would have thought 5 years from then I'd be sitting here with Emily Webb from Niceville High School. It just boggles me. It's amazing. You were halfway through when we first started, not through because you're still going, halfway into your career when we first started this. Quite amazing. So when we first started, it was all about uplifting and honoring coaches. And hopefully that's what I'm doing here with you, Emily. But then it also became like, how much value can we give those people who press play? We have thousands of people listen. And I've heard so much feedback of like, oh man, when coach talked about this or coach gave their experience about this, it really helped me. So for you, Emily, I'm interested, you have 50 throwers, and you mentioned that they kind of run the gamut. There's all different, and you can't take 50 high schoolers and not have these are labels here, but jocks, nerds, a single family kids, full family. You probably have some kid that has 8 sisters and brother. It's all the high academic kids, low academic kids,
Yeah.
high motivated, low motivated, etc. How do you? Because when a coach, what we've seen over and over again, when a coach can relate in some form or fashion. That doesn't mean being their buddies and all this kind of stuff for everybody. How do you relate? When you said that they all know that you've got their back and vice versa, how do you, there's a coach right now listening that says, man, it's my first year or second year, or it's my 10th year and I'm struggling. I can't get through to this person or this person. How do you, as the best you can, assuming you're not perfect, that you make mistakes and you're not batting 100% here, how do you relate to 50 wildly, high school kids have a lot of pressures, a lot of things going on. How do you relate to 50 really individual people that are, I almost said that are all going towards the common goal, but I have to assume that not everybody is pulling the same
Right.
rope all the way. How do you relate as best as you can to all the 50 completely wildly different personality and people types?
The biggest thing is listening. Listen to them, right? Listen and then communicate the best way. Like, it's not about me. It's not about my past experiences. It's not about what I think is right and wrong. It's about, hey, like, take that away and just listen, right? And just really listen to what they're saying to you and give them, I guess, a safe place, right? Like, a lot of kids bottle a lot of things up, and just hey, I had a bad day, I had a horrible test or something, and that carries over to the rings. But I feel like getting to know your kids and like oh, hey, so-and-so is off. Something's wrong. Like, hey, you good? Yeah, I just had like a bad test day, and it's going to roll over into their practice. Or, like I had, like my parents got in a fight or something, okay, like just knowing and giving them a little bit of grace that like things aren't perfect. And like, okay, hey, today's not going to be 100% day because they just let me know that they were up all night because parents were fighting or something, something that I wouldn't know because it didn't happen at practice. And I feel like that level of communication and empathy for your athletes is something that maybe it's not really taught growing up, like
Yeah.
to be a coach. Like, you just like, I just feel like I've giving a little bit more to your athletes in that regard. Like you get so much more loyalty from them as an athlete. Um, yeah, that's what I've seen. The biggest thing. And I also like to individually, like I said, individually get to know them, right? Like, like, hey, so and so, come over here. Like, what are we working on today? Like in the ring, and like have some small talk where it's like, hey, that way they know that they can be like, hey, coach, like I'm just not feeling it today. Okay, well, how can we make this better? Like you tell me, like I'm not just gonna immediately rip you because like you're not doing what I want you to do. Let's really communicate on this. And I feel like that has been one of the biggest barriers that's been broken, I guess, in the program, where it's like I just feel like the kids know, like, hey, I can go to Coach Webb and like we can work on what my best is today.
I think you're right about, we don't teach or clinic towards empathy and relating to kids. We go to, I go to a lot of track clinics, and you're starting to speak at a lot of track clinics, and 99% of all the topics are rotational versus shot put, how to release the discus, how to
Yeah.
grow javelin throwers, etc. Very little of it is, well, how to function as a head coach, the things that you have to do as a head coach, which is different than an assistant coach. How do you relate to the to today's kids? Today's kids, I don't know that they're necessarily different than yesterday's kids, by the way. I think they just have different technologies in front of them, but I'm not sure
Well,
that
yeah.
a kid that
Like
today.
high school was hard for us, but with all the stuff added, high school is way harder now.
Yeah,
Like it's just like the stuff that they're like exposed to and whatnot. I
I
just feel like, yeah, like I
I
mean it's both.
I don't know. I don't know. Here's what I do know. I know
Social media is rough.
that in general, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. But here's what I do know. I know that in general, we people, not necessarily track coaches here or track people, we love to put the past on a pedestal,
Right.
and the present and the future is terrible. Like I love this one thing you see on social media every once in a while, where they're like, oh, today we're all on our own devices, and they got a picture of everybody on their cell phones. Back in the day we used to talk to each other, and then there's a picture of a train car. It's it's because that's how we transported back then, and everybody's got a newspaper. No one's talking to each other. It's got a newspaper because that's what we used to do. I think it's just different now. I don't necessarily
Yeah.
agree or disagree regarding social media. That is different. However, I do know we used to prank call people all the time. Anonymously, by the way. That was before Star 69 and all that kind of stuff came in there. Bullyism,
It was still, yeah.
that happened back.
All day.
I just think it's just different ways of bullying now
Correct.
with social media and things like that. So I don't know. I caution always when I hear like, oh, it's so much harder today. It's like, I don't really know, man. I think, and you brought up, no, you brought up social media. I'm gonna bring up media. I think because of social media, it's easier to know when something terrible happens in Fremont,
Yeah.
Ohio today. I can find out in an instant because of my phone. Back when I was in high school in Alabama, I probably never heard of it.
Right. That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Hey, so I got you here. I got a captive audience, and I have someone who I admire a lot about a lot of different things. As we were talking, I kind of just wrote down, these are kind of random. I don't really have an order here. So I have a bunch of questions, and I'm just going to, if it's okay with you, just fire away and you just give us your thoughts and
Okay.
actions. Okay. The first one, I actually didn't write this down, but it's a good timing for this one. I know you because of social media. That's the thing. A lot of people say social media is bad. I think social media is the greatest thing in the whole world because it allows me to meet and know and learn about people that I would never have known about. Pre Twitter and Instagram, I would not know Emily Webb had these kids signing to colleges and did this many kids to the state and where you did. But now you're pretty prolific at it. What is the role of social media for you? Why do other coaches shy away from social media for whatever reason? It doesn't matter. I don't think it's good or bad that you use social media. But why do you're pretty prolific on social media and specifically Instagram? Why? Where did that start and why do you do it? And why is it, I'm gonna say, important to you? I think it's important to you because you do it a lot. So that's why I say, why is it important to you?
I think for me, I get to see so many positive aspects of each of my athletes. And a lot of coaches, just in 2 minutes of saying hello or just seeing them at a track meet, they don't get to see all the layers of what our kids, I guess, are capable of. And so I feel like social media kind of highlights that for them,
Mm.
where it's like, oh my goodness, like, hey, like I just put this girl up, her PRs and her academics, not just her track
Mhm.
side, right?
Mhm.
Like, they're so good academically. And I feel like those things need to be highlighted. Like maybe they're technical, their hard work. Like, oh, I think I saw this girl in a video like, a year ago, and wow, has she really made a change? Like I just feel like different stuff like that, or just like the culture in general. And just, I think the culture too is big, like when college coaches are looking, because it's like they know that the kids are going to go there and work hard for them.
Mhm.
And I like doing that, and I like giving them their moment as well, because a lot of times, you know, kids kind of get overlooked, or like maybe the newspaper didn't mention so and so or this or that, and then they start to really like get in their feels about it. And this way, I feel like every kid is highlighted for all of their strengths
Yeah.
and even like their weaknesses, but the way that they've grown.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I kind of rolled my eyes when you talked about, got overlooked in the newspaper because of the lack of traditional media for our sport.
Right.
So then I say, okay, well, you're your own newspaper. You're your own newscast today with Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. Go
Right.
do it then. Go do it. Take it in your own hands to do it. And that's what I love about the post that you do use. I think when people talk about the negativity of social media, and certainly there are negativities of social media, although they're again talking about that prank calling and stuff. There was negativity of phones back in the day too, by the way, and TV and things like that. So some people shirk away from social media because of that. I'm a believer that the only way you get rid of darkness is through light. So I love when I see people using a social media platform for positivity, and consistent positivity. It's easy to post once and say, hey, look at my kid, I got a PR,
Yep.
hey, congratulations to you. But it takes work and effort and conscientiousness to do it on a daily basis and multiple times on a daily basis, etc. So I was just interested there. Okay, you ready for, I'm gonna call it rapid fire, but don't we still we got a good amount of time here. So you answer. Don't think just because I have 20 questions. I don't really have 20, but questions. I want you to you answer them the way you answer them. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I struggle right off the bat. I struggle with this. So I work really hard for not a balance, but to make sure that I'm overcoming my biases in regards to women and men coaches. So I never ever want to ask the question, "What's it like being a woman coaching boy?" Those kind of things. I think I'm batting 1,000 that I've never asked a single women's coach that we've had here that question. But what I wonder is more of what is the role as you see as being a female coach, because you're dealing and specifically as a throws coach, meaning you are dealing with football and football coaches, which are 99.9% men. You are dealing in the weight room where in the strength and conditioning world, 98% I think are men. These are made up stats, by the way. How is it? Do you see a benefit being a woman coaching in this world, throws and weight room? I'll leave it as that. Talk to me about the role of being a woman coaching in the throws and weight room type world as it relates to football, throws, things like that.
I've been super grateful at the fact that like I've never seen, a difference, I guess, in the way I've been treated by a female or a male.
Good.
Obviously, like you can have, you can have a turd athlete as a female and as a guy, but I've been very fortunate to have the utmost respect from probably 98% of all of the kids that I've ever coached. My intensity changes with a guy a little bit. Like now, some of my guys don't respond to that. And so like, it has to be more of like a laid back approach. A lot of like just per se, like football guys, like they like the intensity. They like me being very real with them. Like if that throw is bad, like I'm going to let them know and they're going to want to know why. Right. But that also comes down to like the communication and how I communicate with them. Right. Like everybody's so different. Like I can, a couple of my girls, they expect me to get into them when they are in the ring and absolutely put them on blast because that's how they respond. Right. But some of the other girls, absolutely, I would never do that.
How do you figure that out? Because some people, so first of all, how do you figure that out? Which ones need the I'm gonna call it the more militaristic style of coaching, and need more of the motherly or fatherly, empathetic style? Not only how do you figure that out, which individual, and again, you got 50 of these kids, it's amazing. But also, how do you still stay true to your coaching and coaching style and coaching philosophy? So if you're not the type of person who's naturally going to be, 100% of the time, I'm not barking in someone's face, but I know Johnny needs that at the right time. So how do you stay authentic, but also give each individual the style that they need or crave?
I think I always I'm very, like I said, I'm very transparent, whether I'm softer and more empathetic about it, or if I'm just very blunt and like intense about it. Right. So like it just basically my delivery just changes. But other than that, like everything else stays the same, like my coaching points, all of the things. Like I can go tell one athlete that is a very like, hey, like I think you need to approach it like this, like chest up, hip drive, all of that. I can approach it that way. I can be like, what are you thinking? Like, get your chest up, hip drive. That's not what we worked on. Like they know exactly that's the exact same thing they both need to fix. But I just know the one's going to respond differently. If I say, hey, you just need to change your hip, he's not responding to that. He's like, oh, okay, it's not that big of a deal. But if coach gets intense with me, oh, I really need to fix it right now. So just like that.
So I heard the intent stays the same. The delivery changes
Correct.
based. Okay, cool. I love that. Okay. I told you these are out of order because I was just, as we were talking, coming up with these questions. So talk to me about college recruiting. You mentioned about being an advocate for these kids, talking to the college coach. There is this debate of should a college coach even talk to the high school coach? It's weird. I'm actually, as much as I love communication and coaches should be talking, I think it's because when I coached in recruiting, and I was known as a recruiter, that was kind of my main duties was recruiting. I didn't call the high school coach, not because I didn't value their input. I just knew you're biased, meaning you're not. And I know, Emily, you may push back and say, oh, no, if a kid's a bad kid, a bad apple, I'll tell that. I just don't believe it. I don't. I think you should, because you lose credibility if you talk about how great this kid is and they go there and they're a turd or whatever.
I'm pretty honest. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm pretty honest about like all of that.
But you are biased, just like when someone asked me about Gill equipment, bro, I'm biased 100%. I'm going to be 100% truthful with you, but absolutely, I am still coming with a bias 100%. So my question is, what do you told us how you do, but what do you think about college coaching, recruiting, of contacting the high school coach or not? What kind of, what are they missing out if they don't talk to the high school coach? Talk to me just about that realm of the recruiting aspect, because you've got a lot of kids recruited. I mean, you've talked to a lot of college coaches.
Yeah, I feel like that's really the only path that it's ever been for me. I don't really, there's not really been like a time where like, I think because I had built so many great relationship with a lot of these college coaches. Once that's developed, then it's like, they know, like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these college coaches, I feel like I can, hey, I need your opinion on something, or, hey, what would you do in this? It's become more than just like just about recruiting, or, I'll pick their brain about stuff. So I think that's pretty cool, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think if you have a coach that you feel like, I don't know, for me, like I'm going to continue coaching, right? Like, and my goal, my goal is to stay at Niceville and continue to build this program. I guess they know that they can trust, my opinion. I get in that regard, or if I'm like, hey, like I just don't think that the intensity, like they're gonna cut. I don't know. I guess I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing as long as you know you're speaking to, a coach that's gonna be honest with you.
Right. And certainly you've had coaches who have recruited your kids who have not reached out, because not 100% of coaches, unless you tell me it's
Right.
just different in the throws world, I just don't believe that. But there certainly have been coaches that have recruited some of your athletes without reaching out to you. And again, I'm not
Yeah.
here to judge whether that's right or wrong. And maybe this is more is if any of those kids have ever signed with one of those coaches, and we're not here to name names, but did you feel like that coach and athlete missed out on something because they didn't reach out to you,
No,
their
I think as long
judgment?
as they're getting the opportunity, no matter what way it is, I feel like that's a win,
Okay.
right? Like, it's not about like me,
Mm,
it's about the athlete. So, like, a lot of times, and a lot of coaches do send like mail to the school,
mm,
that'll come for the athlete. So, typically, I can always reach out with the athlete or however that is. And if they need film, because that is one thing I do like to provide for my athletes is like, hey, just let them know, do they need any film? Because I have all the film from practices,
wow.
like, comparison and stuff like that. I think like it's bad. Like that's what I do. Like we just break down film all the time. So I have that to provide if they need it, or, hey, do they need their transcripts or anything like that?
Yeah.
So just
You
easier
said
routes.
an important thing there. You said, it's not about me. Ego is not bad. Bad ego is bad. And I do wonder sometimes if bad ego jumps up in a high school coach and they feel disrespected, and it's like, but it's not about you. It's about that
If
kid.
the end
But
goal is the same, right?
right,
Like
right,
my goal is to get them recruited, or if they're recruiting them, either way, the end
right.
goal is the same.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
by the way, the other side of that true is other side of that is true as well for the college coach of bad ego of, I call the high school coach because I'd like to know more their insight into the kid. Or does bad ego go, well, I want that high school coach to know, yeah, coach so and so from big time universities calling, like I'm going to get some help because I'm at big time. Again, ego is
Yeah.
not bad. Bad ego is bad. All right, cool. This next question actually kind of is related to that one. So, talk to me about the role of the high school coach in the expectations of scholarship. We touched on this earlier, and appropriate level. And what I mean by appropriate level is if you have I'm going to kind of make up numbers here a little bit because I'm not terribly super as knowledgeable as you are. If you have a 30-foot girl shot putter, athletically, the SEC, I'm a big SEC homer, by the way. I know you're probably a Big Ten person because you're in Ohio, but I grew up in Florida and Alabama, so the SEC can do no wrong. A 30-foot woman's girl shot putter, athletically, the SEC is not the right level, maybe for that person, but that might be the right level for that person in regards to just their college experience. Not every kid is going to be an All-American, not every program. In fact, I would think even in some of the great, you have a great program right there in state, Coach Holloway, another Gill podcast alum, by the way. Every one of his athletes don't all go to nationals and score. There's plenty of kids that just, they have a good
Right.
experience, and that's awesome. They're gonna be much better people for it because they were on the team, things like that. So what is your role as a high school coach? What do you believe your role as a high school coach is to help the kids understand a scholarship expectation? So full ride, walk on, everything in between, and also what level, whether that's Power Four, junior college, everything in between.
I think mostly it's like, okay, where are your numbers and what are the standards for the colleges? Like typically I'll be like, hey, like, can you give me a list of like 5 schools, 5 dream schools or whatever that you would like to throw at?
Mhm.
And we'll start there. And typically it's like, okay, well, just let you know, 1, 2, and 3, these are their standards. So until we hit their standards, or if it's like a coach that I've spoken to and like, they've given me their standards, I'll just say, hey, like, but once we come within striking distance of those, I can reach out. Right. So
So
then it's like,
how do you handle it then? You've got the greatest kid in the world, good grades, the whole nine. She's that 30-foot shot putter, and she says, "Hey, Coach Webb, it's been my dream. I'm from Niceville, Florida, and I grew up a Florida State fan. So I'm gonna use Florida State as the example. I want to go to Florida State. And you're like, yeah, well, hey, let's look at the ACC. Let's look what's on Florida State's roster. And of course, we're going to see that 30 feet isn't going to be any close. And she just tells you, I'm not looking for a scholarship. I would just love to wear the uniform. Like, I just want to try out. I just want to walk on. And you're like, yeah, man, 30 feet though, hun. Like, man, you could go to such and such university and score in conference and, get a scholarship. How do you handle that conversation? And does that conversation happen a lot, or am I making up like a scenario that just never happens?
Yeah, I will say, like, I think because I've been so transparent with them, and like I will tell them, like, hey, like, this is their walk-on standard. They pretty much know what it is. They haven't really done that. Or if it's like, hey, like, don't, like, if you want to go to Florida State, like, you don't have to throw. You know what I mean? Like, or one of those where it's like, I've just been very transparent. So I haven't had any kids with super unrealistic expectations or anything like that, because these schools still, even as a walk-on, they still have standards, and so it's like, we have, like, and I tell them, we have to respect that. And so that's kind of where I look at it. And then I always offer them, like, and I will say my kids are great about having very open minds about, hey, an opportunity is an opportunity. And I think I've instilled that in, like, just like what I try to tell my kids, like, hey, like, JUCO, D1, D2, D3, it doesn't matter. Like, an opportunity is an opportunity. And now with the transfer portal and all of that, it's like, okay, if you're not there yet, you're not there yet.
Yeah.
Go build, and then, do your thing.
So when you say I haven't had unrealistic expectations, the internet tells me you are an extremely lucky person, because that's all I hear about is D1 or bust. And how do I get a kid to understand that D3 is the right avenue, or D2, et cetera?
I think a lot of kids, like, maybe even at home, like, maybe they feel like D1 is like what the expectation is. But I think once they start to see, because we do a lot of following of programs with the program. Like, I'm like, hey, did you see so-and-so through this? Or, like, they're watching the college, they're watching the professional level. They're very versed on it. I feel like, because, like, I've made them kind of nerd out in the throw world. I feel like and then TFERS is a real thing. I say, hey, go on TFERS and go look at their top 10 and tell me if you fit in there. If you do, then we'll talk about it. Because, like, I'm a realist in regards to that. I'm like, hey, like, if their meter marks are in the 50s and your meter marks in the 30, I'm not sure we're there yet.
Yeah, I love that. TFERS is a real thing. TFERS might have been the greatest thing for recruiting and expectations in any education, coaches, philosophies, etc.
Yeah, I think when they can see it on paper, they understand.
Yeah, I love that. And how much is any type of unrealistic expectations have really start coming from parents and their bad egos? And what I mean by that is, when parents are around their little social circle in their neighborhood, and they're bragging about, my kid got a academic scholarship to Harvard, and you're over there, yeah, well, my little Susie, yeah, she's going to Warner. And I'm like, Warner, where's Warner? And it's like, no, that person's still going on to college. That's great. But the ego of the parent is like, man, all these people are bragging about their kids going to Florida State, et cetera, and my kid's going to, I have to explain where Warner is in Florida. How much
I've been fortunate. If they do it, it's not in front of me. So I just there's that line between the parent. Like, I like to stay away from that. That is one thing.
That may be the smartest thing. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. I'm in my own bubble over here.
I love it. I love it. All right. So this next question is kind of adjacent to as well. You talked about you transferred, and you did not transfer for athletic reasons. But now, a hot topic is the transfer portal. And again, I realize it's been 19 years since I've coached. I have not coached double the amount of years you have coached, Emily. So you're such a pup on this. I love it. You've got 20, 30, 40 more years, 50 more years to coach. It's awesome.
Oh,
I love it.
Don't tell my husband that.
Hey, bro, with medical advances that we're making, you're going to live to 100. So that means you're going to coach to 90, 95. I love it. So here's what I don't understand about the transfer portal. And what I'm getting at is, I want to know what your take is on the effect the transfer portal has had on high school recruiting. So I know people transferred before the transfer portal. I dealt with it. I had, a guy who ended up going to become a medalist at the World Champs and Olympics transfer from my school. So I got bit by the transfer bug. Everybody's been able to transfer forever. That's not a true statement, but for a long time now, there's this whole name about it, transfer portal. It's easier to make yourself available to transfer. I hear from coaches of how it's killing high school recruiting. I hear that all the time. That's literally the number one thing. It's killing high school recruiting. I don't understand how it's killing high school recruiting. And some of the explanations I've gotten from some of my quote unquote mid-major coaches is, I get a kid, I'll use javelin as an example. I get them 180 from Niceville High School. They come to my mid-major school. I'm a really good javelin coach. Things line up and now they throw 240, 250, whatever it is. And, quote unquote, big school scoops them up. So that big school didn't go recruit a high school kid. They recruited mine. High school kid got screwed. And my response is always like, okay, but that kid transferred from your program. That means your scholarship's opened up. So maybe,
Right.
so I can wrap my little mind around that. Maybe the transfer portal has made Power 4 recruiting harder for high school kids. Not impossible, because I still see plenty of kids signing Power 4s out of high school. But my mind can't wrap around that it's killed or extremely hurt high school recruiting. What's been your experience? You've been 10 years, and I can't remember how long transfer portal has been around, but certainly it is hyper focused today than it was in 2014. What's been your experience of the negative, positive, neutral effect of transfer portal on recruiting? You've had kids sign big schools down to, I call it mid-major, my school, Troy. You've run the gamut. What's been your take on the effect of the transfer portal?
I think it's about that. Yes, I think it's going to be harder as a high school athlete to get into those, Power 4 schools and, the big, like, a Florida and Auburn, all of that, because I think their standards are changing as well with the portal and whatnot. But I mean, it's not to discourage a high school athlete to try to go somewhere, maybe in their mind smaller, even though it's still like Division 1's division, like one. And if that's what we're looking for, there's opportunities, right? Division 2. And I like to tell my kids too, like, hey, like, you could go be a national champion in D2. Like what, like, so I just, until I feel like we cross that bridge when it's like, okay, what opportunities do we have? But yeah, I have noticed that in the past couple of years where it's more of the Power 4 schools. Okay, hey, if that's where you eventually want to be, then you may need to start smaller and just build.
Mhm.
Just like some of these other kids have done
Yeah,
from
and
other
what
schools.
and my question back to that, and it's a little bit rhetorical, but not fully. So I want you to respond to it. And what's wrong with that,
Nothing.
right?
Nothing at all.
I
No.
mean,
An
almost,
opportunity is an opportunity. And I tell
yeah.
my that all the time.
I mean, plenty of people. You graduated from Kent State University. That's a mid-major school, and you've had a successful career, and you're being successful in this other side of coaching. There are people that graduate from Warner, Jacksonville College, Jacksonville State, Troy, Florida, Miami. Not all. Every one of these kids has the opportunity to be successful and also not be successful. And I'm not talking about athletics, by the way. I'm talking about just in life, like getting a job and, raising families or whatever your goal set is. So yes, I always like, so what's wrong with that? What's wrong going to I always gotta be careful on how I use some examples, a non-Power 4 school and then transferring because you got better. By the way, blessings to that coach that got you better at the quote unquote mid-major or D2 or whatever
Yeah.
role. And I go to D3 nationals, D2 nationals, D1. I've been to NAI JUCO nationals, one of my favorite meets in the whole world, actually. And I tell you what, I don't see less joy on a kid when they win an event at those meets than I do at Division 1. There's a lot, and I don't see when they give out the team trophy. I don't see the team winning, the team that won the national championship and at these other levels go, yeah, but it's not D1, so it's not really that good. No, they're happy. They're having an amazing experience. And just to keep adding to that, a lot of our college coaches all started at a D3, D2, NAIA, JUCO, mid-May. They didn't start, some start straight up as at a Florida, Miami, whatever, but they've all gone through their own transfer portal, if you will, of their
Yeah.
career. So I always kind of just responds back like, so what's wrong with that? Now, I also realize I'm not in that situation of that being that mid-major school that's having all their quote unquote studs transfer and you're starting all over again. So I have a lot of empathy for that as well. So, all right, cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, these are kind of random. So what, my question is about body image as a throws coach. And what I mean by that is I am amazed. Like I still remember one of the first times I started learning hammer when I went from high school to coaching, to college coaching. And I remember being at it must've been nationals, but I saw these hammer throwers from USC, and they look like high jumpers. And that was the first time my little pea brain, had an image of what a thrower is supposed to be, regardless of whatever they threw. It just, here's what I thought a thrower was supposed to be. And then I see this like, oh man, I thought you were a high jumper. Oh, by the way, I don't know if that, the one I have in my head won the national title. I know she was All-American. So, I mean, so high level throwing. How do you deal with, you see a kid, struggling being a runner? This goes back to your origin story. Struggle being a runner, doesn't, air quotes here, look like a thrower, but you're like, oh no, give me him or her. Give me a couple seasons and I'll have them throwing the javelin or the discus or the shot. And they're just like, coach, you want me to throw the shot or that's not me. Look at me. How do you deal? So I'm putting it in the body image type of world. How do you deal with that as a high school coach?
I think at the beginning, it was a lot harder to convince all different shapes and sizes to come out and give it a chance. But now that I've, been in it for going on now 10 years, I feel like my girls have seen all different shapes and sizes. My boys have seen all different shapes and sizes and success at all levels. So it's a lot easier to kind of convince, like, hey, come out and try it. Or, oh, if coach says maybe like I should do it, I should do it. But I think what it is just like I explain, like, hey, look at Kovacs and Krauser. Like they're completely different, right? Like they're completely different and very successful. Just like I have like that on my team right now. Like I have one that's like tall and lean, and then I have one that's short and stocky, and they're both equally successful, right? Like their approach just may be different. One may be a glider, one may be rotational. And so that's where I kind of just say, hey, well, I actually see a lot of potential there, whether you think you're a high jumper or not, but our approach will just be different in the throws, where it's like, we'll base your technique off your strengths rather than, and so they usually give me a chance. Like they're usually pretty open to it.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Emily, we're near the end of our time. I still have a ton of questions, but you tell me, are we hard fast to stop, or do we have a few extra minutes? Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. I want to be respectful of your time. Appreciate that. Again, I told you these kind of jump back and forth because I wrote them all out of order. Recruiting, back to recruiting. How do you explain, or how do you talk to a kid? Again, this is kind of that D1 or bust mentality about the opportunities in D2, D3, NAI, JUCO. How do you approach that with a kid, a kid that, going back to this mythical 30-foot girl shot putter, and you're like, oh man, you know what? I know you want to go to Florida. I keep using all these Florida examples for obvious reasons. I know you want to go to Florida with Eric, but man, if you went to this JUCO, there's a JUCO Coffeyville, Coach Wood, great throws coach. If you went there for 2 years, you might, maybe you just need a couple more years of training. How do you, or again, do you talk about the other opportunities, not just the opportunities of the schools that we see on Saturday playing football? How do you talk about these other opportunities?
Sometimes I'll reach out to these other schools without maybe even telling them, and then just say, hey, like so-and-so is actually interested. I reached out. Would you be interested in looking into it? And I think that kind of approach intrigues them rather than them just being like, oh, well, so I can't go there. I need to go here. And I think once they know that a coach is interested in them, like, I don't know, kids have different, like, I think that approach is a little different where they're like, oh, they are? Like, okay, like, yeah, I'll look into it. And so then I kind of let them do their research from there. And a lot of times it's done really well for my kids. Like I just had a kid, he was signed to a D1 program, and he actually is going to go to JUCO, and he knows that it's because he's going to go and try to build a little bit better. So, the whole bigger fish in a smaller pond type situation.
Yeah. I don't know that we're talking about junior college enough in the high school world. I think I hope it's an obvious conversation to have when academics are an issue, but I think there's a whole nother aspect of the athletic side. Like you're just not ready yet, but boy, give me 1 or 2 years and, then transfer. And I
tell that. Oh, and I feel like for the boys, it's a lot different too, because a lot of times I've noticed like boys come into their prime more like their junior, senior year. And a lot of these boys that can't keep weight on, or they're starting to gain finally their senior year, it's like, they're going to be special. It's just, they're later in the game. So it's like, just take an opportunity to develop somewhere. And then you're really going to, like, your ceiling's so high.
Yeah. And I get, we talk about egos and bad egos with adults. we're talking about 17, 18-year-old kids here. So, the ego hit of like, oh man, I can get a book scholarship to, I'm gonna go to your neighbors to the north. I can get a book scholarship to go to Georgia, or I can get everything paid for, but I got to go to Neosho County Community College. I don't even know where that is in the middle of Kent. That was where I used to coach. I get an 18-year-old kid going, dude, what are you talking about, coach? Why are you saying I need to go there? I can go to Georgia. It's like, yeah, but man, you could not only save yourself a ton of money,
Yeah.
you could earn a lot more money once that's over as well. So I get, it's a tough, I think people that have these diehard attitudes and opinions about these different things are forgetting that at the end of the day, we're talking about humans, whether it's a 17, 18-year-old kid human or a 40-year-old college, high school, human. There's ego is always at play. Again, that's why I say ego is not bad. Bad ego is bad. So it's pretty tough out there. Hey, switching up topics here. So I told you, and for you guys that listen regularly, maybe you were able to listen to all of them. I was able to interview one high school coach from every state, including Washington, D.C., about their state meets. And one of the questions that we talked about were the question I wanted to ask was, what unique events do you do? But, I was asking the person who does them, so they're not unique to them, right? So I went through and talked about, you do the 1, 2, 4, and the 8, 16, 32, do you do 300 hurdles, 400, those kind of things. In the throws, one of the questions we asked everybody does shot put and discus. Yay, everybody. Because that's not the same for triple jump and long jump, by the way. Not every state does those. Everybody does long jump, but not triple jump, which kind of is crazy. But javelin. And so we found out that 23 states have javelin, and one of the newest states is Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I just retweeted this past weekend. I saw that the number one high school kid in the javelin is from Florida. I didn't even check what school. It's not from Niceville, is it?
No.
I probably should have done my homework on that, by the way. You said his name so quick. I'm like, oh God, it's her.
We competed against him. Yeah, it was him. That was my guy's top rival this whole year.
Love
so
it,
it's funny, but I'm glad he did amazing.
So I love that Florida, within its first year, has the number one kid, because Alabama, when they added, that's my home state, so I have some pride there. Very soon after they added, like within the year 3 or 4, they had the number one. And so it makes me like, I just look at that and I go, wow, Texas, one of the states there, California, or even Illinois. There are kids walking those hallways right now that they're missing out on the opportunity to throw the javelin and earn a scholarship and have experience going to college. So my question to you is kind of two-parter. One is, you had the javelin introduced to you throughout this past 10 years. So, and you weren't a javelin thrower. So how did you start learning, or maybe even before it even came on the scene, you already, just foresight, you started doing it. So how did you pick up, started coaching the javelin as a new event for you in the high school? And two, I don't know what 2 is. Maybe 2 is like, should other states have it? That's a dumb question, though. Talk to me about you. That was a dumb question. The important question is, how did you pick it up? Because that's a fear of a lot of coaches of like, oh my God, if Illinois adds it, I've got to learn that. I know nothing about javelin. That's going to be unsafe, not good. I'm not going to be good, blah, blah, blah. You went through this experience.
I was actually super excited that they added it, because we only had the shot and disc, right? And we were doing so well in the shot and disc. I was like, oh, this is like one more event. Like, we could add some points. Like, so I was like, I just got to get to like learning all the ins and outs of it. And I've been fortunate enough to learn from some of the best, Tom Putskis and Dana Pounds Lyons. So I mean, I dove right in, and to my, I wanted to learn every part of it and then figure out how I could not easily, but teach these kids as well, right? So like when we got the heads up that it was going to become like an official event, I got right to work in learning and educating myself as much as I possibly can. And I'm still educating myself. But yeah, I mean, and it's cool because now it's become a very regular event for us at Niceville. We're in year 4 of it. Yeah, I think we're in year 4. And so now it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, it intrigues a lot of people. If you can throw football, if you can throw baseball, like, oh, maybe I should try the javelin, just something that these kids would have never thought about before.
Yeah. I love, Florida is an interesting high school state for track and field. No doubts about the talent, many sprinters, distance runners, a lot of different throwers, events have come out of Florida high school. When you go and visit Florida, it's interesting. It'll shock a lot of people how many I think the old term is all weather tracks, non-rubber track. Like how many asphalt cement tracks there are a lot. And you think for such a great state of for track and field, you're like, oh no, they're all Mondos and Binans and et cetera. And it's like, no, man, there are a ton of just concrete asphalt tracks. It's crazy. And then you look at some of the progressiveness that Florida high school track and field has made, adding the javelin, moving to the 400 hurdles. So, if you think there's not a lot of javelin states, again, there's 23, 400 hurdles we learned, off the top of my head, it was like four states: South Carolina, Florida, Jersey, and Iowa. And I'm sure someone's yelling at me right now because I'm missing the other state. Go listen to all the podcasts and you'll know which ones had the 400 hurdles, but very, very few have the 400 hurdles. Florida added that in this past year or so. It's quite amazing. Florida feels like in the past 10 years has gone from like, we rely on our population base. That's why we're so good at track and field, beyond the coaches as well, obviously, to like, oh no, we're going to use this population base, really educate our coaches, add some things that are going to help our kids for the next level. And you're going to see what you think you're top over there, California and Texas. We're coming. And it's really been cool to see that rise in Florida high school track and field continue. No real question there, Emily. I know that's terrible. It was much more of my stand on my soapbox and just say how great Florida's doing. And I'm proud that they've added the javelin. And again, I love that. What did you say his name was? Jackson?
Preston.
Preston. But what year is he? Is he a senior or?
He just graduated. Yes.
Yeah. Where's he going?
I think he's going to TCU.
Oh yeah, he is. I did see that. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love it. Okay. All right. Last question. I don't know why I'm asking you this. It just popped up as we were talking over the past hour. And so the World Athletics has talked about some things that they're looking at to change for the sport. I'm not going to ask the long jump one for you. Don't worry. I know I saw you like, oh God, what's he going to ask me? They got many, many ideas that they're bantering around, and I love it. I don't necessarily agree with any or all of them. But I love that we're thinking, because we've got to change some things in our sport. I hope everybody would agree with that. We just can't continue down the path that we're going today to be a viable sport. Now you got to define viable. Does it really matter that we get on TV? There's a debate about that. Does it matter if 10,000 people go to Eugene or 1,000? Again, that's debatable. There's debates for that. There really is. But one of the things that they said they're going to look into is the weight of the women's implements. And it is kind of, when you talk about equal rights and fairness and balance, it is odd that a boy goes from, I don't even know the middle school, but lower than 4K for the shot put, right? Yep. I totally bet my kid throws in middle school. I should have known that. Right off the top of my head, I should have known. So 4K for the shot put, goes to high school, moves to the 12 pounds. Makes sense. Okay. They're bigger. They're in high school now. They graduate from high school and they now throw 16 pounds, college and elite. A girl in middle school throws the 4K, right? Am I right about that? Yep. My daughter's not middle school.
It depends. I feel like they've gone.
Yeah, some's different. Yeah.
In 4K,
in plenty of states, they throw the 4K. Maybe some states do because it's middle school. Yeah, right. But plenty of states throw the 4K. The real point is here, they go to high school. The girls throw 4K. Yep. Even though they're bigger, they're in high school, they're older, they're stronger, they're doing your weight program. They still throw the same. And then they go to college and they still throw 4K. And the exact same thing happens in the discus, the 1K all the way through versus 1.6 to the 2K. It seems like, and certainly we're looking at, when you look at college and post-collegiate throws, man, it ain't like, people are throwing these things out the stadium, it feels like. So what are your thoughts? This is kind of my final question for you. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts about, should implements go up in college? We won't get into the nitty gritty of oh yeah, it should go up a certain percent, whatever same percentage. We won't get into all that crap. Smarter people than you or I can figure out what it should, or if it should.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because you've had plenty of girls go on to college. Should they have gone to 5K or in 1.6K? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I personally think a girl's development, they develop so early and the guys develop so late. And so where they're growing into their bodies, they still have all the growth to go through into their mid-20s and whatnot. And girls don't. So I feel like a lot of the girls are done growing by the time, in their development, other than maybe their strength training, but guys can always get stronger too. So to me that, I mean, I think it's kind of silly. I mean, I think what if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of
Yeah.
thing. But no, I think it should stay the same. I don't think it should increase. But
Yeah.
that's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
That statement you just made, that's that, so, sometimes that's important, sometimes it's not. When you say if it's not broke, don't
Yeah.
if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think that is important a lot of times. And then other times, especially as a manufacturer, I'm like, yeah, but that's how we make amazing innovation,
Right.
by the way, sometimes
Right.
breaking it before someone else breaks it or puts you out of business, you gotta, break it. But I do wonder, that's a good point. When I think about whether it's the popularity of the events, I'm talking about specifically shot and discus here, or the records, whether they are or not being broken, and how far, because you do have to think about the presentation. If guys are throwing, 70, 74 plus feet, and then, in the same Prefontaine Classic or Olympics, what's a women's shot putter? What are they throwing? 62, 65? Yeah. If you made it way more and they start throwing 55, even though I know the competitions aren't going at the same time, but there is a little bit of like, oh yeah, see, women are inferior, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
it's
Well, that and all of what they've worked for and all of these records and standards, now they just stop rather than to see how the sport's evolved and how the women have evolved with that weight and all of that. I think it's pretty cool to
I
see how much, I think
yeah,
all of it.
I think I get what you're saying on that, but I don't know that I agree with that, because like when the javelin changed,
Right.
like you can't compare those. They're two different events, much like
Yeah.
this. You heard about the long jump change that they're proposing, right?
I don't know. I listened to a lot of just the throw stuff.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I was like, no, it's like, no,
In
is
all
is there a
fairness.
thrower's long jump? Then no, of course not. So they're talking about, so Randy, the long, so the long jump, right?
Yeah.
There's a foul line, right? So they're talking about, because a lot of fouls occur, and that's not really good for presentation. So what if we had a zone, and I'm just going to make up, because the worst thing World Athletics did is they said all this stuff, but they gave no specifics. So now we get to just we guess. They're going to do a zone, so I'm just going to say a 1 meter zone. They did not give any consultation of what they're thinking, but let's just say a 1 meter zone that a jumper can take off at any place inside that 1 meters, and you measure from that point. Okay. And so again, because the World Athletics gave just no specifics about it, they just threw that out there and said, y'all talk amongst yourself. So there's a lot of talk about, well, you'd have to start a whole new world record. That's not the same event, blah, blah, blah. And that's true. That's exactly right. That long jump event is different than what Mike Powell, Carl Lewis, and these guys have jumped. It'd be a totally different event. And I think that's okay. I really do. Just like if we went to 5K for the shot put for women,
It's y'all do.
it's a new event. Yeah. And we can see progression, because we know, Susie threw, 60 feet in the 4K. And then when she got to college, well, that'd be a heck of a high school throw, huh? 50 feet, which is amazing, in the 4K. And now in college, because she throws the 5K, she got up to 50 by her junior year or whatever. Like, it's amazing. Because think about, if we don't allow ourselves to do those kind of progressions, I don't know that we'd, and this is also crazy stuff, I don't know that we ever would have allowed women to steeplechase, because like, hey, no, they do the 3K. How are we going to know their progression if we now add hurdles in it? Women hammer finally got to do hammer, 2000, 2004, things like that. Is like, I think it's okay to have a new event, because it is a new event. It's a little asterisk new event, because it's still a shot put, but I think that's okay. But I get where you're coming from. I'm not bashing. And there was no reason. You didn't even say that earlier. I just literally, as I was writing down questions, I was like, oh, I wonder what she thinks about this. So I appreciate your opinions there. Emily, the reason I asked all those questions is because I find your experience and your background fascinating. One of the many, many reasons of this podcast and the feedback I get on the value of it is showing how different routes are to where you are today. If I were to say, hey, I'm going to have a Florida high school throws coach onto the podcast, who's had many, many kids sign for college scholarships, what do you guess her background would be? Many, many people have said, oh, she probably threw in college all 4 years, and she maybe not necessarily was an All-American. I don't even know what level, but she certainly had some pretty good success about it. Probably majored in education or exercise fit. Like that's the air quotes typical. I've yet to find anybody who has the typical route, though. And then it's like, oh, no, here's this kid who fell in love with it because she thought she was a runner, and then they needed someone to step in for the discus at conference in 8th grade, and was like, oh, wait a minute, where's this been my whole life? and it set you off on this journey. I'm gonna call it I don't want to use the word tumultuous, but certainly not maybe what you would have mapped out college career for throwing. You major in hospitality management. I love that. I love that because, to be in hospitality management, that is a servant leadership position 100%, which is exactly what coaching is. I mean, those majors are not far. That major in that career, coaching track and being a hospitality manager, that is not as far off as maybe someone would initially seem. It's like, oh no, that's a very clear path actually because of the servant leadership part of it. So you go on and do that, and then you just brazenly go, you know what? I think I should coach this. I'm going to call up this high school. That journey alone would have been amazing. Like, oh yeah, we've got 5 to 10 kids and we do well. And, we had one kid sign a couple of years ago to a college scholarship, whatever, but it was awesome. And no, instead you've now taken that and built this really positive culture throws program, which I have to believe has positively affected the other parts of the track program. I think the sprinters and hurdlers have to be a little bit better there. The distance runners have to be like, man, hey guys, you see what they're doing? We better step up over here on the distance side, guys and gals. Like they're doing pretty good. Even the coach, 50 throwers. Well, I can't let that happen. I got to have 100 distance runner. I mean, it all feeds and makes the program better. And so I just love that journey that you've had up to this point. I'm super excited and so grateful that you do post on social because I get to watch from the sidelines what next year brings, 5 years brings, 10 years bring. I'm going to have you back on the podcast in like 10 years and be like, all right, so now what do you know? And you're going to be like, Mike, I thought I was doing pretty good after year 10. I knew nothing because here's what I've learned in the next 10, because you build just like you build on your throwers, how, building their weight room, they can, they work out every day. Consistency is so important. They build, and the end product comes. That's what you're doing as a coach. You're going to learn more this next year, more in 26, more in 27. That's just going to make you continually be a better coach and better person, which is going to pour into those young people that, are really blessed to have you as a coach. So I'm just so grateful for you, man. I'm just so fascinated by your background, your experience. I'm enamored by it. I really am so grateful for you sharing your journey.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that we finally got to, like I said, you've been on the list. Everybody hits me up about being on the podcast. That's egotistical. A lot of people hit me up, not everybody. And I always tell people you're on the list, and sometimes you forget. I only do one a week of these. So that means out of all the coaches, and remember, we don't just focus on college or high school or throws, every track and field coach. So I don't know, thousands and thousands of them. And I get to do 52 a year. That's hard. That's hard to get on here. So you've been on the list. It's just taking some time to get you up there. And I'm just so grateful we got that time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Emily, thank you so much. Again, one of the most valuable things you can give me is your time, especially as a air quotes here, just stay-at-home mom. Yeah, you knew I was going to work that back in there. I know how busy you are. I am married to a mom as well, and she is amazing with 2 kids. I don't know how you do it with 3, by the way. That's just crazy talk. But so grateful for your time, grateful for your really your openness, transparency, and authenticity of sharing your journey. You've helped a lot of people today, and I'm just so glad that we had this opportunity to learn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for being here again, man. I hope you guys, there's every episode that I've done, 260, 270 something now at this point, everyone has been amazing again, because of that unique journey. There's a few that I think we just get to really pour into the value side of it. Like we get to hear their opinions and their thoughts from their experiences. And I think this one, after sitting here for, we're getting on 2 hours now, I think there's just a ton of value in here. So there's probably other coaches, maybe high school specific, but I think college coaches as well. Some of her experiences and opinions and thoughts on, college recruiting and how do you talk to your kids about expectations and things like that. I think it's really valuable. So maybe it would be some value to share to your network out there as well. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. We'll do it all over again. Have another awesome person here on the Gill Connections podcast. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have an awesome week.